This is the tale of the glitter bomb incident, a disaster so ridiculous that even the teachers couldn't stay mad. It's the kind of story that gets funnier every time we tell it, even though, in the moment, we were sure we were going to die, or at least get expelled. It started in our class. Our teacher, Ms. Klein, was one of those free-spirit types who never really believed in rules. If you wanted to paint, paint. If you wanted to sculpt, sculpt. And if you wanted to spend the entire period throwing clay at your friends, well, as long as no one bled, she wasn't going to stop you. So naturally, her classroom became a breeding ground for dumb ideas. One day, we were working on some abstract art project, basically just an excuse to throw paint at canvases and call it expression. That's when my friend Jesse had a terrible idea. "Yo," he whispered, leaning over to me. "What if we filled the ceiling fan with glitter?" At first, I thought he was joking. "That's the stupidest idea I've ever heard," I said, shaking my head. "Why would we?" But before I could finish, Jesse's eyes lit up in that dangerous way that meant there was no stopping him. He stood up, grabbed a giant container of glitter from the supply shelf, and gave me a grin that could only be described as suicidal optimism. "Come on," he said. "Think about it. The fan turns on. Boom. Instant party." Now, at this point, any reasonable person would have told Jesse to sit down and reconsider his life choices. But we were high schoolers, and high schoolers have the unique ability to believe that every bad idea is also a genius idea. So we helped him. It took about 5 minutes of pure, frantic stupidity to pull it off. We unscrewed the cap from the glitter tub, stood on some wobbly desks, and carefully poured all of it into the little plastic cups on the ceiling fan blades. By the time we were done, the fan looked innocent enough, just sitting there, waiting for someone to flip the switch. And that's when Ms. Klein came back into the room. We all scrambled back to our seats, trying, and failing, to look innocent. Ms. Klein glanced around suspiciously, but didn't seem to notice anything out of the ordinary. She sat down at her desk, flipped through some papers, and reached for the switch that controlled the ceiling fan. Everything slowed down. Jesse whispered, "Oh my God, she's gonna do it." Ms. Klein flicked the switch. At first, nothing happened. The fan groaned to life, the blades spinning lazily, as if trying to decide whether they wanted to cooperate. And then it hit full speed. What followed was a glitter explosion. The blades spun so fast that the glitter launched into the air like a rainbow tornado. It shot across the room in every direction, twinkling, shimmering, everywhere. Within seconds, the entire classroom looked like it had been hit by a disco ball bomb. There was glitter in the paint on the desks in our hair. I swear, even the air looked sparkly. At first, nobody moved. We all just sat there in stunned silence, watching as the glitter storm raged around us. And then, because there was no other option, we lost it. Everyone started howling with laughter. People were falling out of their chairs, slapping their desks, and gasping for air. Jesse was crying from laughing so hard, and I was pretty sure I was going to choke on a glitter particle. It was beautiful. Ms. Klein? She just sat there, blinking slowly, her entire face covered in glitter. For a moment, she looked like she was trying to process what had just happened, like her brain was buffering. And then, to our absolute shock, she just started laughing. She leaned back in her chair, glitter raining down from her hair like confetti, and let out this loud, wheezy cackle that sounded like she hadn't laughed that hard in years. At that point, we knew we were safe. If the teacher thought it was funny, we weren't getting detention. Or so we thought. Because here's the thing about glitter, it doesn't go away. Ever. The next day, the art room was still covered in sparkles. No matter how much the janitors swept and mopped, the glitter just stayed. Every desk, every corner, every paintbrush, it was everywhere. And it spread. By the end of the week, there was glitter in the hallways, the cafeteria, and even the main office. Students were finding it in their lockers, their backpacks, their food. One kid swore he saw glitter in his textbook. Another said he found some in the gym showers, and none of us knew how it got there. It became a running joke. Every time someone found glitter, they'd yell, "Thanks, Jesse," and the whole room would crack up. But the best part? About a week after the incident, the principal called an emergency meeting for all the teachers. The topic of the meeting? Unidentified glitter contamination. We heard later that they spent almost 2 hours trying to figure out where the glitter had come from and how to stop it from spreading. The janitors tried everything, vacuuming, steam cleaning, industrial mops, but it was no use. The glitter was there to stay. To this day, whenever we visit the school, you can still find tiny specks of glitter in random places. It's like a permanent reminder that no matter how much the school tries to control things, chaos will always find a way. And Jesse? He's a legend. Every time someone sees a stray piece of glitter, they just shake their head, smile, and say, "Classic Jesse." And honestly, it kinda is. I was running late for work, like really late, the kind of late where every minute feels like it ticks twice as fast. My boss had already sent a passive-aggressive, "Just checking if you're on your way," smiley face text, and I could practically feel the rage building up in my chest. So I did what every idiot does when the universe seems to conspire against them. I made the dumbest possible choice. I decided to skip breakfast and throw together a protein shake. I was on autopilot: banana, scoop of powder, milk, and then, because I'm fancy like that, a spoonful of peanut butter. Except the peanut butter jar was nearly empty. You know how it gets, thick, sticky remnants clinging to the sides, mocking you. I reached in with a butter knife, scraping the jar, muttering under my breath like it was the jar's fault I'd overslept. One last swipe, and clank, the knife slipped out of my hand and plunged straight into the blender, which, in my infinite wisdom, I'd already turned on. The blade caught the knife, and for a split second, the world went slow motion. I didn't even hear the blender, just this high-pitched whine of metal on metal, followed by the sickest sound you can imagine. It was like a shotgun blast, only smaller and closer. The knife shot out of the blender so fast that it was just a blur. I swear it whizzed past my face, so close I felt the air shift. There was no time to think, no chance to react. 1 second, I'm standing there trying to scrape out peanut butter, and the next, a knife is embedded in the cabinet door behind me, quivering like something out of a horror movie. If I'd been standing even an inch to the left, that knife would have punched a hole straight through my head. I just stood there, staring at it, my brain refusing to process what had just happened. My hands were still gripping the counter, white-knuckled, and my heart was doing this insane drum solo in my chest. I think I even laughed for a second. One of those nervous, what the hell just happened laughs. Then it hit me. I almost died. In my kitchen, over peanut butter. That's when the shake exploded. The blender, God bless it, was still running, and the moment the knife exited, the pressure must have shifted or something because the lid popped off and the entire contents sprayed across the room. Protein shake everywhere. Banana chunks on the ceiling. Peanut butter plastered to the fridge. It looked like a food fight had broken out between bodybuilders and toddlers. And there I was, standing in the middle of the mess, still shaking, still processing while protein sludge dripped off the walls. I could barely hear anything over the sound of my own heartbeat hammering in my ears. I stumbled back, slipping a little on the smoothie slick floor, and just stared at the scene around me like I'd walked into a crime scene. It was ridiculous. It was horrifying. It was honestly kind of funny in a twisted way. I mean, who nearly dies in their own kitchen from a rogue butter knife? I sat down right there on the floor, my back against the counter, and tried to catch my breath. My phone buzzed with another text from my boss. I didn't even look at it. I was too busy thinking about how close I'd come to bleeding out in my socks, how my obituary would have read something stupid like, "Death by protein shake. Local man meets tragic end due to poor breakfast decisions." Eventually, I dragged myself to my feet and unplugged the blender. I pulled the knife out of the cabinet, inspected it for a second like it was some cursed object, and then threw it into the sink with a clang. My hands were still shaking as I wiped up the mess, my brain replaying that close call on an endless loop. When I finally got into my car, I just sat there for a minute, gripping the steering wheel, staring out the windshield at nothing. I couldn't stop thinking about how easily things could have gone the other way. One tiny shift in timing, and I'd be on the kitchen floor, blood pooling around me, smoothie sloshing underfoot, waiting for someone to find me hours later when I didn't show up to work. All over a damn butter knife. I ended up calling in sick. No way was I going to sit through traffic after that kind of existential wake-up call. I drove straight to the park instead, grabbed a coffee from a kiosk, and sat on a bench for what felt like hours, watching squirrels chase each other through the fallen leaves. I had no idea what I was looking for. Maybe some kind of cosmic reassurance that life isn't as fragile as it seems, but nothing came. Just squirrels, just coffee, just a strange, empty feeling in my chest. It's funny how fast things can turn sideways. One second you're making breakfast, and the next you're inches from disaster, standing in your own kitchen wondering how close you just came to not existing anymore. It messes with your head, knowing how thin that line really is. I think about that stupid knife a lot more than I probably should. Every time I see it in the drawer now, I get this weird little chill like it's a ticking time bomb just waiting for another chance to go off. I never did finish making that shake. And to this day, I can't look at peanut butter the same way without feeling a little queasy. Maybe it's irrational, but I swear that jar was out to get me. The text came out of nowhere, just after midnight. "You up?" It was from Taylor. I hadn't heard from her in over a year. Not since that last messy argument where we said things we couldn't unsay. I stared at the message, thumb hovering over the screen. I thought about ignoring it, letting it sit there unanswered like some ghost from the past I wasn't ready to deal with. But before I could stop myself, I typed back, "Yeah, what's up?" Her reply came almost instantly. "Can we go for a drive?" Taylor was the kind of person who never explained herself in advance. She just expected you to get it. And for some reason, even after all this time, I did. I grabbed my jacket, shoved my keys into my pocket, and headed out the door without even asking where she was. When I pulled up to her apartment, she was already waiting at the curb, arms crossed against the chill. Same leather jacket, same wild, unbrushed hair. She climbed into the passenger seat like no time had passed between us, her presence filling the car with that familiar mix of chaos and calm that had always been uniquely hers. "Thanks," she murmured, buckling her seatbelt. "For what?" I asked, glancing at her out of the corner of my eye. "For coming." And that was it. No big explanation. No apology for the time or distance between us. Just Taylor, like she'd never left. We drove in silence at first, the city blurring by in streaks of streetlights and shadowed storefronts. I waited for her to say something. Anything. But she just stared out the window, her fingers drumming lightly against her knee. "Where are we going?" I finally asked. She shrugged, her gaze still on the road ahead. "Just away." It was such a Taylor answer, the kind that should have annoyed me, but didn't. So I kept driving, heading toward the outskirts of the city, where the lights gave way to open roads and fields stretching into the dark. Somewhere along the way, Taylor leaned over and fiddled with the radio, stopping on a song that neither of us knew but felt right. She rolled down the window and let the wind whip through her hair, closing her eyes like she was trying to breathe in the night itself. I watched her for a second, the corners of my mouth lifting in a small, involuntary smile. "You're still the same, you know," I said. She opened one eye, smirking. "Is that a compliment or an insult?" "Depends." She laughed, that same easy, reckless laugh that I hadn't realized I missed until now. We ended up on a two-lane highway, the kind that stretches endlessly in either direction with nothing but the occasional farmhouse blinking in the distance. I glanced at the clock. 2:13 a.m., too late to be out, too early to go home. The in-between hours, where everything feels both unreal and more honest than it should. Taylor tilted her head back against the seat, her voice soft when she finally spoke. "Do you ever feel like you're waiting for something to happen, but you don't know what?" Her question hung in the air between us, delicate and heavy all at once. "Yeah," I admitted. "All the time." She gave a small, sad smile, like she'd known I'd say that. We kept driving, the road unfurling beneath us like it didn't have an end. The air inside the car felt lighter now, the silence between us easy, like an old song you didn't realize you still knew all the words to. At some point, Taylor rested her feet on the dashboard, her hands tucked under her thighs to keep warm. I glanced over at her, and for the first time in a long while, she looked content. Not happy, exactly, but okay. "Remember that time we drove to the beach at 3 a.m.? She asked suddenly, her voice full of nostalgia. I grinned. "Yeah, you tried to convince me we should swim even though it was freezing." "I still think we should have," she said, laughing. "You almost got hypothermia just dipping your toes in." "Worth it," she said, grinning wide enough to light up the whole car. We kept swapping old stories, road trips gone wrong, parties that ended in disaster, the dumb adventures that felt so huge at the time. With each memory, the tension between us eased a little more, until it felt like we were right back where we used to be. Two people who didn't need much more than a car and an open road to feel like the world made sense. Around 4 a.m., we pulled over on the side of the road, near a field that stretched out beneath the stars like an ocean made of grass. The sky above was endless, clear and full of constellations we couldn't name. Taylor climbed out of the car without a word, and I followed her, the cool night air biting at my skin. She spread her arms wide, spinning in slow circles like a kid, her laugh echoing out into the empty night. "God," she said, breathless, "why does this feel so good?" "Because we forgot what it's like to not care," I replied, leaning against the hood of the car. She stopped spinning and looked at me, her eyes soft and full of something I couldn't quite place. "I missed you," she said quietly. I swallowed hard, the weight of those words settling somewhere deep in my chest. "I missed you too." We stood there for a while, side by side, staring up at the stars. It felt like the kind of moment you want to bottle up and keep forever, even though you know it'll slip through your fingers as soon as the sun comes up. Taylor nudged me with her shoulder. "So, do you think we'll ever figure it out?" "You smiled, glancing over here." "Probably not." She laughed, soft and genuine, the kind of laugh that makes you feel like everything might be okay, even if you have no idea what you're doing. When the sky started to lighten at the edges, we climbed back into the car and headed home. The drive was quieter this time, both of us too tired to talk, but it wasn't the uncomfortable kind of silence. It was the kind that feels like a shared secret, like a promise that doesn't need to be spoken out loud. By the time we reached her apartment, the sun was just starting to rise, painting the buildings in soft, golden light. Taylor unbuckled her seatbelt and gave me a look that said thank you, and I'm sorry, and I'll see you again all at once. "Drive safe, okay?" she said, her voice warm and familiar. "You too," I replied, knowing full well she wasn't going anywhere. She lingered for a moment, like she wanted to say something else. But instead, she just smiled, that small, crooked smile I knew better than anything, and slipped out of the car. I watched her disappear into the building, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel lost. As I pulled away, the road stretching out in front of me like a clean slate, I realized something. Some people come back into your life when you least expect it, not to fix what's broken, but just to remind you that it's okay to carry the mess with you. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. For now, it felt like it was... The day was going fine until the grocery store self-checkout machine decided to ruin my life. All I wanted was a few essentials: bread, bananas, some yogurt. Nothing complicated. I figured I'd be in and out in 10 minutes. But no, the machine had other plans. It started innocently enough. I scanned the bread. Beep. Perfect. I scanned the bananas. Unexpected item in the bagging area. Of course, I moved the bananas slightly to the left, hoping the machine would chill out, but it beeped at me like I'd insulted its ancestors. "Please remove the item or place it in the bagging area." I was already regretting every decision that led me to this point. The person at the register next to me was breezing through their groceries like they were in a timed competition, while I was locked in battle with a piece of sentient machinery that refused to let me win. I removed the bananas. Then I put them back. Same error message. I glanced around, hoping a cashier would swoop in and save me, but the only employee nearby was chatting with someone at the lottery machine, oblivious to my quiet breakdown. I took a deep breath, the way people do in yoga classes, and tried again. This time, the machine accepted the bananas, begrudgingly it seemed, but I wasn't in the clear yet. I reached for the yogurt. I knew, in my heart, that this was a mistake, but I was too far gone to turn back now. I scanned the yogurt, and the machine beeped angrily. "Item not recognized. Please place the item in the bagging area." I did. It beeped again. "Please wait for assistance." At this point, I was ready to abandon my groceries and live in the forest. Maybe I didn't need bread. Maybe I didn't need yogurt. Maybe all I needed was to disappear into the wilderness, far away from technology and unexpected items in bagging areas. But just as I was about to walk away, The employee finally wandered over. "Having some trouble?" she asked, smiling like this was her favorite part of the day. "Yeah," I said, trying to sound polite, even though I was one more beep away from a full mental collapse. "It won't let me scan the yogurt." She nodded like she'd seen this before. She tapped the screen a few times, swiped a card through the machine with the precision of someone defusing a bomb. And just like that, the machine beeped approvingly. "Please proceed with payment." "Thanks," I muttered, feeling both grateful and humiliated. She smiled and wandered off, leaving me alone with my shame and a bag full of groceries. I swiped my card, waiting for the machine to approve my purchase so I could finally escape this nightmare. But instead, it spat out a new message. "Please remove your card." I pulled it out too quickly. The machine beeped again. "Card error. Please try again." My soul left my body. I inserted the card a second time, slowly this time, like the machine was a wild animal I didn't want to startle. It processed. I held my breath, and then finally, the receipt printed. I grabbed my bags and bolted for the exit, not daring to look back. Outside, the fresh air hit me like a blessing, and I stood there for a moment, savoring the sweet relief of freedom. I had escaped, barely, but I had made it out. On the drive home, I thought about how strange it was that a trip to the grocery store could feel like a trial by fire. It's never just groceries. It's a test of patience, resilience, and the limits of human endurance. By the time I got home, I was too tired to eat any of the food I'd just bought. I tossed the bags onto the counter and collapsed on the couch, scrolling mindlessly through my phone as a reward for surviving the ordeal. And that's when I saw it. A meme about self-checkout machines that said, "I'm sorry, human. I'm afraid I can't do that." I laughed harder than I probably should have. Not because it was particularly funny, but because sometimes the only way to deal with life is to laugh at the ridiculousness of it all. Maybe next time I thought I'd just go to the regular checkout line. Or maybe, just maybe, I'd learn to live without yogurt. It always starts the same. I won't stay long. That's the lie I tell myself every time. I'll have one drink, maybe two, say hi to some friends, and then I'll head home early. No chaos, no complications. Just an easy night out, in and out. But I've been telling myself that lie long enough to know it never plays out the way I think it will. It was a Thursday night, one of those weird liminal nights that feels harmless, like nothing meaningful could possibly happen on it. That's how it gets you. A friend texted me out of nowhere, "Come, just for a bit. The drinks are cheap and the music isn't terrible." I sighed, staring at my phone. I knew I should have stayed home, but the thought of sitting alone with my thoughts for another night felt heavier than the worst hangover. By 10 p.m., I was slipping into a dress that wasn't quite comfortable, but looked good enough to make me forget that it wasn't. The bar was only a few blocks away, one of those dimly lit spots where everything and everyone looks better in the dark. The music thumped low in the background, the kind of bass that makes your chest vibrate, and the place was crowded but not unbearable. Just enough people to make the night feel alive. And then I saw him. He was sitting at the bar, nursing a whiskey on the rocks, looking like he was perfectly fine being alone. That kind of confidence, being completely comfortable in your own company, is magnetic. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He wasn't scanning the room. He was just there like the world could rise and fall around him, and he'd stay exactly where he was. Our eyes met, and that was it. Just one glance, and I felt the pull. The kind of pull you feel in your stomach before you even know someone's name, the kind that makes you lean into trouble without even realizing it. I told myself I'd just say hi, maybe flirt a little, and then go back to my friends. But you know how these things go. I slid onto the bar stool next to him, giving him a quick smile. "Is this seat taken?" He looked at me over the rim of his glass, one eyebrow raised. "It is now." There was an ease to him, the kind of charm that sneaks up on you. He wasn't trying too hard, just funny enough to keep me engaged, just flirty enough to make me want to stay. We started talking, and it felt like diving into warm water, effortless and comforting. I told him about my boring job. He told me about his weird side gigs, each story more ridiculous than the last. Somewhere between the second and third drink, his hand brushed against mine, and my breath hitched just enough for him to notice. "You okay?" he asked, grinning like he already knew the answer. I nodded, but we both knew what that touch meant. We weren't strangers anymore. Not really. "Let's get out of here," he whispered, leaning in close enough for his breath to graze my ear. I could have said no. I could have laughed it off, stayed with my friends, and made it home before midnight. But I didn't. I never do. The walk to his place was short, but felt longer, in the best way. Each step heavy with anticipation, every glance between us crackling with possibility. His hand found my waist as we climbed the stairs to his apartment, and that small, familiar touch sent a thrill down my spine. His place was exactly what I'd expected, a little cluttered but not messy, with a sagging couch and a bookshelf full of paperbacks that looked well-read. We didn't waste time. The door clicked shut behind us, and suddenly the world outside didn't exist. The sex was good, not life-changing, not storybook perfect, but good in that raw, urgent way that makes you feel alive. We moved together like two people who knew exactly what they were doing. No hesitation, no awkward fumbling. It was messy in the best way, full of laughter and whispered curses, like we both knew how fleeting it was and wanted to savor every second of it. For a little while, it felt perfect, like maybe this was what I'd been looking for all along, a night that didn't need to mean anything more than what it was. But mornings have a way of unraveling everything. I woke up to sunlight streaming through the window, too bright and too unforgiving. The bed felt too warm, too tangled, and his arm was draped across my hip like it belonged there. For a moment, I let myself stay still, eyes closed, pretending that this was something it wasn't, that we were more than two strangers who collided for a night. But the weight in my chest told me the truth. This was just another night that burned bright and fizzled out before the morning could fully arrive. I slid out from under his arm, careful not to wake him, and started gathering my clothes. The room was silent except for the soft hum of the city waking up outside, and every piece of clothing I pulled on felt heavier than the last. My dress, wrinkled and too tight, felt ridiculous now, like I was wearing a costume I didn't fit into anymore. I knew I should leave before things got awkward. I knew exactly how these mornings played out. You slip out quietly, you don't look back, and you tell yourself that it's fine, that it was fun, that it doesn't have to mean anything. But as I reached for my shoes, he stirred, blinking awake. His hair was a mess, and he gave me a sleepy smile that made my heart twist in ways I didn't want to examine too closely. "Leaving already?" he asked, voice rough with sleep. I forced a smile. "Yeah, I've got a busy day." He nodded, stretching lazily. "Well, it was fun." "Yeah," I whispered. "It was..." And just like that, it was over. The walk to the curb felt colder than it should have, the morning air biting through my coat. I wrapped it tighter around me, but it didn't help. The cold I felt wasn't just on the outside, it was the kind that settles deep in your bones, the kind you can't shake off. The Uber ride home was silent except for the low hum of the engine. I stared out the window, watching the city pass by, and tried to convince myself that this was what I wanted. Just a night, nothing more. But the truth sat heavy in my chest, impossible to ignore. It wasn't about him. It never is. It was about the pattern, the way I keep chasing moments that never give me what I need, hoping that maybe this time it'll be different. It never is. I got home, kicked off my shoes, and collapsed onto my bed without even bothering to change. The ceiling stared back at me, blank and indifferent, and I lay there, waiting for the emptiness to lift. But it didn't. It never does. I wish I could say that night was the last time, that I learned my lesson, stopped searching for connection in places where it doesn't exist. But the truth? I'll probably do it again, because as much as I hate the mornings after, I hate the silence even more. Maybe someday I'll figure it out, or maybe I won't. Maybe I'll keep going, one night at a time, hoping that eventually, one of these mornings will feel different. But until then, all I can do is keep moving forward. One kiss, one drink, one morning after the next. I never thought much about elevators, until the night one almost became my coffin. This was about 5 years ago. I was living in a mid-rise apartment building downtown, the kind that's full of 20-somethings just scraping by. Rent was cheap, and the only real downside was that the building was ancient. The kind of place where the radiators hiss all night, and the plumbing sounds like a dying whale every time someone flushes upstairs. One night, After a late shift at work, I trudged home around 1 a.m., exhausted and ready to collapse. My apartment was on the 7th floor, and I was not about to take the stairs. The elevator was old, like really old, complete with one of those clunky metal gates you have to pull shut yourself. But, I was used to it. What's the worst that could happen? Well, I was about to find out. I pressed the button, stepped in, and pulled the gate shut behind me. The elevator gave its usual shudder, like it was debating whether or not to actually do its job. It finally lurched upward, and I leaned against the wall, zoning out, already half asleep. About halfway up, between the 3rd and 4th floors, the thing just stops. No warning, no jolt, just dead silence. I hit the button for my floor again, nothing. I hit the open button, no dice. Okay, no big deal, right? Maybe it just needed a second. I pulled out my phone to call the landlord's emergency line, and of course, no signal. I remember laughing to myself at that point, thinking classic, this is exactly how it would go down. I hit the buttons again, harder this time, like that would somehow make a difference. The elevator gave a pathetic groan, and then it dropped. Just a few feet, but enough to make my stomach flip like I'd been on a roller coaster. Now I was wide awake. I started to panic. I pulled the metal gate open, but it was just more darkness beyond the crack. I was stuck between floors with nothing but a sliver of the 4th floor visible through the gap at the top. And then, because the universe has a sick sense of humor, the lights went out. The kind of darkness that makes your brain invent things. I stood there, breathing way too fast, heart pounding in my throat. I tried to calm down. It's just a power outage. Someone will fix it soon. You'll be out in no time. Except no. The air started feeling thick, like the walls were pressing in on me. I swear I could feel the whole elevator sway, just a little, like it was deciding whether to hold on or let go. That's when I lost it. I started slamming every button on the panel, kicking the walls, screaming for help like a maniac. Nothing. Just that awful, oppressive silence pressing in from all sides. I don't know how long I stood there in the dark. Could have been 5 minutes. Could have been an hour. Time sort of stopped making sense. My mind went to some dark places. What if no one found me? What if the cable snapped? What if I just stayed here? Forever? I tried to stop those thoughts, but they kept creeping back like shadows in the corners of my mind. And then, just as I was starting to accept the idea that I might actually die in this goddamn elevator, the worst thing happened. I heard breathing. At first, I thought it was my own, heavy and ragged from all the panic. But no, this was different. Slow, deliberate, not mine. I froze, every hair on my body standing on end. I pressed myself against the wall, straining to listen. There it was again, soft, shallow breaths, coming from just beyond the gate. My heart felt like it was going to explode. I tried to convince myself it was my imagination. There's no one there. You're just freaking yourself out. But the sound didn't stop. It was real, and it was close. Then something shifted. A faint scraping sound, like someone dragging their fingernails across metal. It came from just beyond the crack in the gate. My breath hitched. I didn't dare move, didn't dare make a sound. And then, slowly, oh so slowly, the metal gate started to slide open. I swear to God, I nearly blacked out. My legs turned to jelly, and I pressed myself into the corner, trying to disappear into the wall. The gate creaked, inching open, until there was a gap just big enough to see through. There was nothing there, just darkness. For a moment, I thought I'd lost my mind completely, that I'd imagined the whole thing. And then, right when I started to relax, bang, the gate slammed shut again, loud enough to make me scream. The lights flickered back on. I stood there, heart pounding, drenched in sweat, not sure if I was alive or dead. And just like that, the elevator started moving again. It glided up the last few floors like nothing had ever been wrong. When the doors finally opened on the 7th floor, I bolted. I didn't even look back. I ran to my apartment, locked the door, and slid to the floor, gasping for breath. I didn't sleep at all that night. For weeks after, I took the stairs. Every single time, even if I had to climb 7 flights with groceries or laundry. It didn't matter. I wasn't getting back in that thing. The weirdest part? When I finally got brave enough to ask the landlord about the elevator, he gave me the strangest look. There wasn't any outage that night, he said. and the elevator's been running fine for months. I told him what happened, and he just shrugged. That old thing's always been a little quirky, he said, but no one's ever gotten stuck in it before. He winked like it was some kind of joke. But to this day, I swear something was in there with me. And every time I walk past that elevator, I can't help but hold my breath just in case. I stole a dog once. No, seriously, I stole someone's dog. And the worst part is, I have no regrets. In fact, every time I look at him sleeping on the couch, snoring like an old man with allergies, I feel like I saved his life. But still, it's a secret I can never tell anyone. Ever. Because when you think about it, stealing a dog isn't exactly the kind of thing that makes you sound like a good person, no matter how justified you feel. It all started 2 years ago. I was living in this crummy apartment complex that had paper-thin walls and a parking lot full of cigarette butts. You know the type. Overpriced, undermaintained, and full of neighbors who were either too nosy or too absent. One morning, I was leaving for work when I saw this dog tied to the rusty fence by the dumpster. He was this skinny little thing, all ribs and sad eyes, with fur that looked like it hadn't seen a bath in months. I assumed he was a stray, abandoned like an old couch someone couldn't be bothered to throw away properly. It happens more than you'd think. I was running late, so I told myself I'd deal with it later, call animal control or a shelter or something. But when I came back 8 hours later, the dog was still there. Same spot, tied to the same fence, looking even sadder than before. No food, no water, just sitting in the blazing sun, panting like he'd been running a marathon. That was the first moment I thought about stealing him. I mean, technically it wasn't stealing, right? If no one was taking care of him, that was neglect, wasn't it? And rescuing an abandoned animal isn't really a crime. At least, that's what I told myself as I crouched down and let him sniff my hand. He licked my fingers weakly, tail wagging just a little like he was trying to say, "Thanks for noticing me, buddy. Thought I was gonna die out here." I sat there with him for a while, my lunch break long forgotten. He was the sweetest little mutt, some kind of terrier mix, with floppy ears that made him look perpetually confused. The kind of dog you'd see in a movie where it gets lost and has to find its way home through a series of wacky adventures. But there was no adventure here. Just a crappy apartment complex and a dog no one wanted. Then the door to one of the units slammed open, and this guy came out. A big dude with a stained wife beater and a permanent scowl etched into his face. He was holding a beer in one hand and a half-eaten sandwich in the other, and he yelled at the dog like it had personally offended him by existing. "Get your ass over here, you stupid mutt." The dog flinched so hard it made my heart hurt. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't just a stray someone forgot about. This was this guy's dog, and he treated it like garbage. I should have walked away. I knew better than to get involved in other people's business, especially people like him. But something in me snapped. I couldn't leave the dog there. Not with that asshole. So, I did the dumbest, most reckless thing I've ever done in my life. The next morning, I woke up early, grabbed an old leash I had lying around, and went back to the dumpster. The dog was there again, tied to the same spot. His owner was nowhere in sight. It was like the universe was giving me a green light, telling me, "Go ahead, take him. He's yours now." I walked up to the dog, unhooked the flimsy leash from the fence, and slipped my own leash onto his collar. "Small, buddy, we spread. We're getting out of here." And just like that, we walked away together. No one saw us. No one stopped us. It was almost too easy, like stealing a dog was just another errand on my to-do list. When we got back to my place, I gave him a bath, which he hated, and fed him some leftover chicken, which he devoured like he hadn't eaten in days. I sat on the floor next to him, watching him fall asleep with his head on my lap, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. I named him Max. I don't know why, it just seemed to fit. At first, I was paranoid that his old owner would come looking for him. Every time I took Max for a walk, I'd scan the streets, half expecting that big guy in the wife beater to come charging out of nowhere, demanding his dog back. But weeks passed and nothing happened. No missing dog posters. No angry knocks on my door. It was like Max had been erased from that guy's life the moment I took him. And Max? He blossomed. The scrawny, scared little dog I found by the dumpster turned into the happiest goofball I've ever seen. He'd wag his whole body when I came home from work, zoom around the apartment like it was a racetrack, and fall asleep curled up next to me every night. But the guilt gnawed at me. As much as I loved Max, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd done something wrong. I mean, I did steal him. Even if I thought I was doing the right thing, it didn't change the fact that I took someone else's dog. And the fact that I could never tell anyone, not even my friends, made it worse. I live in constant fear that one day, someone will recognize Max, that his old owner will spot him on the street and demand him back. And what will I do then? Hand him over? Pretend I don't know what they're talking about? Run? Sometimes, when Max is snuggled up next to me, snoring like a freight train, I wonder if I'm a bad person. Did I really rescue him? Or did I just convince myself that I was doing the right thing to justify what I did? I guess I'll never know for sure. But here's the thing. Every time Max looks at me with those big, soulful eyes, like I'm his whole world, I can't bring myself to regret it. Not even a little. Because maybe, just maybe, he saved me too. And that's the real secret. The one I'll never tell anyone. I didn't just steal a dog. I stole a second chance at happiness. For both of us. We met at a friend's bonfire. A casual, late summer thing with cheap beer and mismatched lawn chairs around a fire pit. I wasn't planning to meet anyone that night. In fact, I almost didn't go. But something about the promise of a quiet night under the stars, surrounded by friends, felt better than staying home with my thoughts. So I went, not expecting much. He showed up halfway through the night, holding a six-pack and smiling like he already belonged there. I noticed him right away, the kind of person who seems perfectly at ease, like the world doesn't weigh him down the way it does the rest of us. We ended up sitting next to each other by the fire, and at some point, we just started talking. It was easy, the way conversations are when there's no pressure, no expectations. I remember thinking, this feels nice. Safe, even. We spent most of the night like that, sitting shoulder to shoulder, watching the fire crackle and fade while everyone else got louder around us. Before he left, he leaned in, his voice low and easy. Let me know if you ever want to grab coffee sometime. I smiled, surprised at how much I wanted to say yes. Sure, I said. And just like that, it began. Our first date was the kind that sneaks up on you. No grand fireworks, just small moments that felt right. We talked for hours over iced coffees, losing track of time until the cafe staff started stacking chairs on tables around us. He made me laugh without trying, and when he looked at me, it felt like I was the only person in the world. I remember thinking, maybe this could be something. And for a while, he was thoughtful in ways that caught me off guard. Sending me a text when he knew I had a stressful day, showing up with my favorite snacks, making me playlists of songs I didn't know I needed to hear. He wasn't perfect, but he made me feel seen. And after so many false starts, so many people who never stayed, that felt like a miracle. I let myself believe that maybe, finally, I'd found someone who was in it for the long haul. But love, I've learned, is rarely that simple. It started with a subtle shift, so small I almost missed it. He'd take longer to respond to texts. The plans he used to make with such enthusiasm suddenly became maybe, or we'll see. I told myself not to panic, that relationships have ebbs and flows. But it felt like I was reaching out for him, and each time I did, he took a step back. One night, we were supposed to meet for dinner, but an hour before, he sent a text. Can we rain check? Feeling wiped. I knew I should have said no problem, but something in me cracked. I sat on my couch, staring at the message, and all I could think was, why does this always happen? Why does it always end like this? I called him. I couldn't help it. I needed to hear him say it out loud. Needed to know if I was holding on to something that wasn't there anymore. He answered on the second ring, his voice familiar and distant all at once. Hey, he said like nothing was wrong. Are we okay? I asked, my voice smaller than I intended. There was a pause, heavy with everything left unsaid. I don't know, he admitted. I thought I could do this, but maybe I can't. And just like that, everything fell apart. I wanted to ask him why he pursued me if he wasn't ready, why he made me believe in something that wasn't real. But instead, I just whispered, okay, because what else could I say? When someone decides they don't want you, there's no argument you can make to change their mind. We said our goodbyes, polite, distant, like two people trying to pretend the ending wasn't as messy as it really was. When I hung up, I sat there for a long time, the silence pressing down on me like a weight. I knew this feeling too well, the The familiar ache of losing someone who was never really yours to begin with. The next few days were a blur. I went through the motions, work, errands, seeing friends, but everything felt muted, like I was moving through a fog. I kept replaying our conversations in my head, looking for the moment it all went wrong. But the truth is, there wasn't one. He didn't leave all at once. He slipped away slowly, so quietly that I didn't even realize it until he was already gone. That's the thing about heartbreak. It sneaks up on you. It doesn't arrive with a grand declaration. It comes in the little moments, the unanswered texts, the plans that never happen, the slow fate of someone you thought you could hold on to. I wish I could say I handled it gracefully, but I didn't. I cried. Messy, ugly crying in the middle of the night when the weight of it all felt unbearable. I stared at my phone, fighting the urge to reach out, knowing it wouldn't change anything, but still wanting to try. I hated myself for hoping, even after he'd made it clear that hope was pointless. But slowly, things started to shift, not in a dramatic way, just little by little, day by day. I stopped checking my phone every few minutes, stopped scrolling through old messages, stopped imagining him showing up out of nowhere, saying he'd made a mistake. The sadness didn't disappear, but it got quieter. And one day, I woke up and realized that I hadn't thought about him in hours. It wasn't a grand revelation, just a small, quiet moment of peace. But it was enough. I'm still learning how to live with the absence he left behind. Some days it feels easy. Other days, it hits me out of nowhere, sharp and sudden, like a gust of wind knocking the air from my lungs. But that's the thing about healing. It's not linear. It's messy and unpredictable, and sometimes it feels like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But that's okay. I'm learning to be patient with myself. I don't know when or if I'll meet someone new, but what I do know is this. I'm done chasing people who don't know how to stay. I deserve more than that. I deserve someone who shows up, who stays, who makes me feel like I'm worth the effort. And until that person comes along, I'll keep showing up for myself. I'll keep building a life I love, piece by piece, day by day. Because at the end of the day, the most important thing I've learned is this. I am enough. With or without someone else, I am enough. So I'll keep going, 1 breath at a time, 1 step at a time. And if love finds me again, I'll be ready. But this time, I'll know that no matter what happens, I have myself. And that's more than enough. I never meant for any of it to happen. It wasn't a plan. It wasn't even a thought in the back of my mind. But the thing about bad decisions is that they rarely announce themselves. 1 minute, everything feels normal, and the next, you're in over your head with no way out. It started during a heat wave in July. My buddy Caleb's mom, Erin, needed some help around the house. Caleb was working out of state for the summer, and Erin had a list of things she couldn't handle on her own, painting the deck, fixing a leaky faucet, stuff like that. I figured I'd help her out, kill some time, and make myself useful. I'd known Erin for years. She was the cool mom. The kind who gave us beer when we were too young to buy it ourselves and let us crash at her house whenever we wanted. She was beautiful, in that understated way. Soft brown hair, bright green eyes, and a laugh that made you feel like whatever dumb joke you just told was actually funny. I knew people thought she was attractive, but I never let myself go there. She was Caleb's mom, and that was a line I never planned to cross. The first day I came over to paint the deck, she brought me lemonade, and we sat out in the backyard talking while I worked. It felt easy, natural, just catching up about life. I told her how lost I'd been feeling lately, how school hadn't turned out the way I thought it would, and how I had no clue what the future looked like. Life rarely goes the way we plan, she said, giving me a small, knowing smile. But you'll figure it out. You're too smart not to. It was comforting in a way I didn't expect. I wasn't used to someone believing in me like that. We talked for hours, and when I finally left that day, I couldn't stop thinking about her. The second time I went over, the vibe was different. We were more comfortable with each other. Too comfortable, maybe. It wasn't anything obvious, just small things. The way she looked at me when she smiled, the way her hand brushed mine when she handed me a drink. A moment where her laughter lingered just a bit too long. And then after we finished painting, she invited me inside. "Come in for a drink," she said, wiping her hands on a rag. "You earned it." I told myself it was innocent. Just a beer, a little conversation. But the moment I stepped into the kitchen, I felt a shift. Aaron poured us both drinks, and we ended up sitting at the kitchen table, talking like old friends. The wine made the conversation flow easier, and somewhere along the way, things got more personal. We talked about Caleb, her failed marriage, and how lonely she'd been since the divorce. And when she looked at me, really looked at me, it felt like she wasn't seeing Caleb's friend anymore. She was seeing me. "I always like having you around," she said quietly, her eyes flicking to mine. "You were different from the other boys." There was a moment, a split second where I could have laughed it off, changed the subject, walked out the door. But I didn't. Instead, I leaned in and kissed her. It was like stepping off the edge of a cliff, terrifying and exhilarating all at once. Her lips were soft, and for a moment, I thought she might pull away. But she didn't. She kissed me back, and everything else melted away. The guilt, the consequences, the fact that this was my best friend's mom. We stumbled to the couch, hands roaming, lips crashing together like we were trying to make up for lost time. It was messy and desperate and completely wrong, and I couldn't stop. When it was over, we lay there in silence, the weight of what we'd just done settling over us like a heavy fog. "This was a mistake," I whispered, though a part of me didn't believe it. "Maybe," she murmured, her head resting on my chest. But it didn't feel like one. We both knew it should have ended there, but it didn't. Over the next few weeks, we kept finding excuses to see each other. It was addicting, those stolen moments where nothing else mattered. We told ourselves it wasn't serious, that it didn't mean anything, but it did. The guilt was unbearable every time Caleb called to check in. He had no idea what was happening, no clue that his best friend was sleeping with his mom behind his back. Every time we talked, I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting for the ground to give way beneath me. And then inevitably, it all came crashing down. It happened one night when Caleb came home early, without warning. Aaron and I were in the kitchen, too close, too comfortable, and we didn't hear the front door open. When Caleb walked in, the look on his face was pure disbelief. "What the fuck is this?" he whispered, his voice sharp with betrayal. I jumped up, scrambling to put some distance between us. "Caleb, it's not what you think." "Bullshit," he shouted, stepping closer. "How long has this been going on?" I tried to speak, but nothing came out. What could I say? The truth would only make it worse. "You were supposed to be my best friend," he said, his voice cracking. "How could you do this to me?" There was nothing I could say to make it right. No apology that would undo what I'd done. "Get out," Caleb growled, his fists clenched. "Caleb, get out." I left without another word, my heart pounding in my chest, the weight of my betrayal crushing me with every step. Aaron tried to reach out after that. Texts, late-night calls, but I ignored them. It was over. Whatever we'd had wasn't worth the destruction it left behind. Caleb blocked me on everything, phone, social media, the works. I tried reaching out once, but it was useless. I'd crossed a line, and there was no coming back from it. It's been years now, and I still think about that summer. About the moment I could have walked away, but didn't. About the friendship I threw away for something fleeting and impossible. Some mistakes fade with time. Others stay with you, burned into your memory like scars you can't escape. And this one? It's the kind that never stops bleeding. It was supposed to be just a quiet night in. No drama, no complications, just me and Taylor, a bottle of wine, and the same old routine we'd perfected over the years. We'd done this 1,000 times before. She'd show up in sweats, I'd have takeout waiting, and we'd binge-watch some trash TV until one of us passed out on the couch. It was easy. It was us. But that night was different, and I think we both knew it before we even sat down. It started small, a lingering glance, a laugh that lasted just a little too long. We'd always been close, physically and otherwise, but that night the space between us felt tighter, heavier. Like we were both waiting for something to happen, even though neither of us wanted to be the first to make a move. Halfway through the second bottle of wine, she leaned against me, her head resting on my shoulder, and I felt it, this pull, this hum, like gravity was shifting around us. I should have pulled away. I should have said something funny, cracked a joke, anything to push the moment back into safer territory. But I didn't. I just sat there, breathing her in, and before I knew it, She was looking up at me with that soft, searching expression I'd only ever seen once before, on a night we never talked about again. "You ever wonder what would happen?" she said, her voice quiet. "If we stopped pretending?" I felt my heart lurch in my chest. "Pretending what?" She smiled, but there was no humor in it. "That this isn't something." I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but before I could find the words, she kissed me. It was slow and tentative, like we were both waiting for the other to pull away. But neither of us did. And just like that, we crossed the line we'd spent years pretending didn't exist. We made it to my bedroom in a tangle of limbs and laughter, our clothes scattered on the floor, and for the first time in what felt like forever, everything felt easy, natural, like we'd finally stopped holding our breath. Afterward, we lay there in the dark, her head resting on my chest, the sound of her breathing steady and soft. And for a little while, it felt like we'd found something we didn't even know we'd been looking for. "This doesn't have to change anything, right?" she whispered, her fingers tracing lazy circles on my arm. I wanted to tell her it had already changed everything, that I'd been in love with her for years and didn't know how to stop. But instead, I swallowed the words and whispered, "Right. Nothing has to change." And just like that, we set the stage for everything to fall apart. The next morning, we pretended nothing had happened. We made coffee, talked about work, laughed about the show we half-watched the night before. And when she left, she kissed me on the cheek like it was just another Saturday morning. But things between us were never the same. We kept sleeping together, but it was like trying to balance on a ledge, always one wrong step away from falling. Some nights, we were still us. We'd laugh, order food, watch bad TV. But other nights, the weight of everything unsaid pressed down on us, thick and suffocating. I tried not to think about what it all meant, tried not to care that every time she left, it felt like a piece of me went with her. But the truth was, I wanted more. I wanted everything. And the more time we spent in this in-between, the harder it became to pretend I didn't. The thing about Taylor is, she's never been one for permanence. She moves through life like it's a series of moments. Beautiful, fleeting, impossible to hold on to. And me? I wanted her to stay. I wanted her to choose me, not just in the quiet moments when it was easy, but in all the messy, complicated ones too. But she didn't. It all came crashing down one night when she told me she met someone. "It's not serious," she said, like that would make it hurt any less. I forced a smile, nodding like it didn't feel like my heart was breaking in my chest. That's great, Tay." She gave me this careful look, like she wanted to say more, but didn't know how. And in that moment, I knew that I was never going to be the person she chose. We tried to keep things normal after that, but it was like trying to hold sand in our hands. Every conversation felt like a reminder of what we weren't. Every touch like a goodbye we didn't want to say out loud. The end came quietly, as these things always do. One day, she stopped texting as much. The late-night hangouts turned into occasional check-ins. And then, one morning, I woke up and realized I hadn't heard from her in weeks. The last time we saw each other, we hugged goodbye like it was nothing, like we were still those same two friends who'd laughed on my couch all those years ago. But we both knew the truth. Whatever we'd been, whatever we could have been, was gone. It's been months now, and I still think about her. I still catch myself scrolling through old photos, rereading our texts, replaying every moment in my head, wondering if there was anything I could have said or done to make her stay. I miss her laugh, her wit, the way everything felt a little less heavy when she was around. But most of all, I miss the version of me that believed we had a chance. People say that sleeping with your best friend is either the best decision you'll ever make or the worst mistake of your life. For me, it was both. For a little while, I had her, and even though it ended, even though it broke me in ways I wasn't prepared for, I wouldn't take it back. Because some people aren't meant to stay in your life forever. Some people are just meant to pass through, leaving behind a mess of memories and a heart full of what-ifs. And even though it hurts, God, does it hurt? I'm grateful. Because for a little while, she was mine. And even if I never have that again, at least I know what it feels like to love someone with everything I have. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. Or maybe it isn't. But either way, it's all I've got. The first time I tried to flirt at a dog grooming salon, I almost ended up shampooing a poodle. I don't even own a dog. I was just there as moral support for my sister's rescue mutt, Milo, who absolutely hates baths and lets the world know it. "Jake, I swear," my sister had said, shoving Milo's leash into my hand. "If you don't come with me, he's going to destroy that entire shop. Or me." So there I was, standing in the middle of a brightly colored grooming salon, holding a squirming, grumpy terrier mix who looked like he was plotting my death. I figured I'd be in and out in 10 minutes tops, but then I saw her. She was behind the counter, tying a bandana around a freshly bathed golden retriever. I swear she looked like she had stepped out of one of those Pinterest boards called Effortlessly Cute. She wore an oversized sweater with little paw prints on it, and her hair was tied up in one of those loose buns that's somehow both messy and perfect. As she handed the retriever off to its owner, she looked up and caught me staring. She smiled, a soft, easy smile, and my brain immediately started screaming, "Say something cool. Say something cool right now." Instead, I panicked and said, Milo hates everything." She blinked, clearly not expecting that, but her smile didn't waver. "Oh yeah? Milo looks like a heartbreaker. Only if you mean breaks hearts by chewing furniture and screaming at squirrels," I said, holding up the leash as Milo did his best impression of a tornado on caffeine. She laughed, a real, warm laugh, and suddenly the chaos felt a little more manageable. "He's a rescue?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, rubbing the back of my neck. "He's been with us for about a month. We've, been working on his manners." Milo chose that exact moment to lunge at a display of chew toys, nearly dragging me across the floor with him. I stumbled, grabbing the counter to steady myself, and looked up to see her grinning at me. "So, it's going well?" she asked, clearly enjoying my struggle. "Depends on your definition of well," I muttered, trying to wrangle Milo back into submission. "But hey, progress isn't linear, right?" She laughed again, and I felt a spark of hope. "Okay, Jake, you've got this. Just keep it going. Be charming. Or at least not weird." "So," I said, trying to regain some dignity, "do you ever groom like humans? Because I think I could use some professional help at this point." She raised an eyebrow, still smiling. "I mostly stick to dogs," she said, "but I could probably shampoo your terrier for you if you want to tag out." Now, any normal person would have laughed politely and moved on. But for some reason, maybe it was the way her eyes crinkled at the corners when she smiled, or maybe it was the fact that Milo was now chewing through his own leash, my dumbass brain decided to say, I could help. You know, if you need an extra hand." Her eyes lit up, and I realized, with growing horror, that she thought I was serious. "Really?" she asked, clearly amused. "You want to help groom the dogs?" I stammered, realizing I had absolutely no way out. "Sure. How hard can it be?" She grinned and leaned over the counter. "Perfect. You can start with Mr. Snuffles." Before I could figure out who or what Mr. Snuffles was, she motioned toward the grooming station, where a gigantic poodle sat on a raised platform, staring at me like it knew exactly how out of my depth I was. "Good luck," she said with a wink. I stared at Mr. Snuffles, who looked way too calm for someone about to ruin my day. "This is a terrible idea," I muttered, but I was in too deep to back out now. With the barista-turned-groomer watching from behind the counter, her smile doing absolutely nothing to help me think straight, I awkwardly approached the poodle. I grabbed a bottle of shampoo and squirted way too much into my hand. "All right, Snuffles," I said cautiously. "Let's make you shiny, I guess." The poodle gave me a look that could only be described as judgmental. I tried my best to lather up his fur, but the shampoo was slippery, and before I knew it, I'd accidentally squirted some on my jeans. The poodle sat perfectly still, probably wondering how I'd made it this far in life, while I fumbled with the spray hose, somehow soaking both my shoes and most of the floor. "You're a natural," she called from the counter, laughing. "Glad someone thinks so," I grumbled, trying and failing not to trip over the hose. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, Milo decided that now was the perfect time to escape. With a wild yelp, he slipped out of his collar and bolted across the room, knocking over a basket of dog treats in the process. I lunged after him, slipped on the wet floor, and landed flat on my back. From my new position on the ground, covered in suds, treats, and shame, I glanced up at her, half expecting her to be horrified. But instead, she was laughing so hard she had to lean against the counter for support. "You okay down there?" she asked between giggles. "Never better," I muttered, lying there like a broken piñata. She walked over and held out her hand, still grinning. "Come on, dog whisperer," she said. "Let's get you off the floor." I took her hand, letting her help me up. "So, how'd I do?" She pretended to consider it. "You get an A for effort, but maybe leave the poodles to the professionals." "Fair enough," I said, wiping soap off my shirt. "But, hey, if you ever need backup for anything less slippery, I'm your guy." She tilted her head, smiling. "How about coffee sometime? Less risk of injury." I blinked. "Wait, seriously?" "Yeah," she said, grabbing a pen from the counter. She scribbled her number on Milo's now-chewed leash and handed it to me. "Text me. I'll even let you pick the place." I stared at the leash, half expecting it to vanish like a dream. "This isn't like a pity date, right?" She laughed, and it was the best sound I'd heard all day. "No, I just think you're fun. Terrible at dog grooming, but fun." I grinned, suddenly forgetting about the wet floor, the poodle, and everything else. "I'll take it." As I left the salon, with a soggy Milo and Mr. Snuffles glaring after me, I couldn't stop smiling. Sure, I'd made a complete fool of myself, but somehow, I'd still managed to walk away with a win. And honestly, that was more than I'd hoped for. So, there I was, standing in line at the grocery store, minding my own business, when I saw her. The kind of woman who makes you forget what aisle you're in. She was standing a few places ahead, tossing things into her basket with this casual elegance, like she had a PhD in life and grocery shopping was just one of her many hobbies. She had one of those band t-shirts on, Fleetwood Mac, I think, so naturally I thought, this is my in. The idea felt simple enough. Compliment the shirt, segue into a conversation about music, maybe laugh about the price of organic avocados, and boom, soulmates by aisle 9. I was absolutely convinced this was one of those meet-cute moments you only hear about in podcasts hosted by people who own a lot of succulents. Anyway, she finishes up at the self-checkout, and I realize my window of opportunity is closing fast. I panic and do what any reasonable adult would do. I abandon my cart right there in the middle of the aisle and speed walk toward her. Smooth, right? Not suspicious at all. "Hey, I love your shirt." I blurt out, probably a little louder than necessary. She turns around, and I'm hit with this 1-second eternity of eye contact. This was supposed to be the part where the magic happens, where she smiles warmly and we bond over the chain. But instead, she just gives me a polite, closed lip smile. You know, the kind that says, "Thank you, but please leave me alone before I have to make this weird." But do I leave it at that? Oh no. I keep going because my brain has apparently been hijacked by rom-com logic. Fleetwood Mac? Huh? Good taste. Let me guess. Rumors is your favorite album? I say it like I'm the Sherlock Holmes of music preferences. She raises an eyebrow. I actually got the shirt at a thrift store. I don't really listen to them. And just like that, the mental orchestra in my head screeches to a halt. I'm left standing there, grasping at the social equivalent of smoke. But I'm not ready to admit defeat. Not yet. So I scramble for a recovery. "Oh, cool," I say like a guy trying to sound cool who has absolutely never sounded cool a day in his life. "So, what's your go-to music then?" This is where things start to fall apart even faster than I thought possible. She glances toward the door, probably weighing her odds of escape. "Mostly podcasts," she says, shifting her bag on her shoulder in a way that screams, "I need to leave," but society frowns on sprinting away from weird men in grocery stores. Now, any rational person would have taken the hint and gracefully bowed out. But no, I decide to double down on this flaming wreckage. I lean in slightly, because nothing says charming like closing the personal space gap, and ask, "Podcasts? Nice. True crime, right? Everyone loves true crime. Why did I say that?" As soon as the words leave my mouth, I know I've messed up. The look on her face shifts from mild discomfort to "you might be a serial killer who just revealed his favorite genre." She gives me this tight, polite laugh that says, "Please disappear into the earth." And in that moment, I finally get it. The cosmic memo arrives. Abort mission. Abort. But here's the thing. My social instincts are already 6 exits past salvation. So instead of saying, "All right, have a great day," like a normal human being, I blurt out, "If you ever want music recommendations, I've got tons." No pressure, though. She just stares at me. A beat of silence passes. And then, oh man, she pulls out her phone, holds it up like a shield, and mumbles, "I really need to take this call, except the screen is dark." There is no call. There will never be a call. She walks away, fast, leaving me standing there, basking in the glow of my own humiliation, as some teenage cashier snickers from behind the self-checkout. It gets worse, because as fate would have it, I bump into her again, literally on my way out to the parking lot. I'm trying to wrestle my cart out of the line of shopping carts, because apparently, even inanimate objects know I'm a disaster today. As I pull my cart free with a little too much force, it rolls right into her as she's walking past. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." I stammer, scrambling to stop the cart like I just sent a cannonball into her kneecaps. She freezes, looking at me with this perfect blend of surprise and terror, like I just confirmed all of her worst assumptions from the grocery aisle encounter. "It's fine," she says quickly, brushing past me like I'm the plague in cargo shorts. And just like that, she's gone, into the sunset, or at least the Target across the parking lot, leaving me to stand there, wondering how a simple compliment on a t-shirt had snowballed into one of the most catastrophic social interactions of my life. So yeah, moral of the story? Just because you think you're in a rom-com doesn't mean anyone else agreed to be cast in it. And maybe, just maybe, abandoning your grocery cart to chase a fleeting moment of connection isn't the genius idea it feels like in the moment. Also, pro tip, if someone says they're into podcasts, don't immediately assume they want to discuss the finer points of homicide. Turns out, not everyone finds that charming. About 2 weeks after that coffee shop encounter, I got a message from him. Just a simple, "Hey, can we talk?" It sat there, unread, for a good 15 minutes while I stared at my phone like it was ticking down to explode. I knew I shouldn't open it, but curiosity is a dangerous thing. Against my better judgment, I clicked. The message was short. Too short considering everything we'd been through. He wanted to meet up. For closure. I let out a dry laugh. Closure. That magical word people throw around when they want to stir the pot without admitting it. But for reasons I can't fully explain, I agreed to meet him. Maybe it was for closure. Or maybe part of me just wanted to see him squirm. We met at a small bar downtown, the kind with dim lights and too loud music. He was already there when I walked in, nervously stirring his drink, eyes scanning the room. When he saw me, his face lit up with something that looked like relief, or maybe guilt. I wasn't sure which. He stood up awkwardly, like he couldn't decide whether to hug me or shake my hand. I saved him the trouble by sliding into the seat across from him without a word. The silence stretched between us, heavy and awkward, until finally he cleared his throat. "I know I don't deserve your time," he began, looking down at his drink. "But I wanted to say I'm sorry." The thing is, I thought hearing those words would feel satisfying, like a long overdue win. But they didn't. They just felt empty. "You're sorry," I repeated, not even bothering to disguise the skepticism in my voice. "For what, exactly?" He looked up, and for the first time in a long time, I saw something genuine in his eyes. "Regret. For hurting you. For lying. For everything." I leaned back in my seat, folding my arms. "So, you're not with her anymore?" He winced like the question had physically hurt him. "No, it didn't work out." Of course it didn't. These things never do. Affairs built on lies tend to crumble the same way they started. Quietly, painfully, with a lot of loose ends and broken promises. I didn't feel sorry for him. If anything, it confirmed what I'd already known, that I was better off without him. We sat in silence for a while after that, the hum of conversations and clinking glasses filling the space between us. Finally, he looked at me with this sad little smile and said, "You were the best thing that ever happened to me. I was just too stupid to see it." And there it was, the final twist of the knife. It's funny how people love to romanticize their mistakes, as if admitting they were wrong somehow makes it all better. But life doesn't work like that. Apologies don't erase the damage. Regret doesn't undo betrayal. I stood up, tossing a couple of bills onto the table. "I hope you figure your shit out," I said, my voice calm, almost indifferent. "But don't contact me again." He opened his mouth to say something, but I was already walking away. As I stepped out into the cool night air, I felt something unexpected: freedom. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't weighed down by what-ifs and unanswered questions. I was done, completely, finally done. And that's the thing about closure. It doesn't come from the other person. It comes from within, from accepting the apology you'll never get and moving forward anyway. In the weeks that followed, life began to feel lighter. I started doing things for myself. Things I'd put on hold while trying to hold our relationship together. I took a pottery class, signed up for yoga, and even adopted a dog from the local shelter. His name is Milo, and he's the sweetest little mutt with mismatched ears and a goofy smile. Every time I look at him, I'm reminded that life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. And then one day, while I was out for a walk with Milo, I ran into an old friend I hadn't seen in years. We ended up grabbing coffee, and what started as a casual catch-up turned into hours of laughter and reminiscing. There was no pressure, no expectations, just two people enjoying each other's company. It felt easy, natural, like breathing after holding your breath for too long. That night, as I curled up on the couch with Milo snoring softly beside me, I realized something. I was happy. Not the kind of fleeting happiness that comes from external things, but a quiet, steady kind of joy that comes from knowing you're exactly where you're supposed to be. I didn't need him. I never did. And as much as his betrayal hurt, it also set me free. Free to rediscover myself, to rebuild my life, to learn that love isn't about holding on to someone else. It's about learning to hold on to yourself. Sometimes the hardest thing you can do is let go of someone you thought you couldn't live without. But once you do, you realize that the only person you truly need is the one staring back at you in the mirror. And that person? She's stronger than she ever knew. This happened last October. I still can't wrap my head around it, and honestly, I don't think I ever will. I was driving back from a Halloween party out in the sticks, way out in the country, where the roads wind through miles of farmland and dense forests. I'd left the party late, around 1:30 a.m., and was already regretting it. Fog had rolled in thick, and the road was barely visible under the beam of my headlights. There wasn't a soul around, just me, the empty road, and the occasional glimpse of fields behind a veil of fog. My GPS had me taking a bunch of small back roads, and after about 20 minutes, I realized I hadn't seen another car or house in a long time. That's when I came to the fork in the road. The GPS told me to take a left, but something about that road didn't sit right with me. It was pitch black, lined with overgrown trees that twisted over the road like a tunnel. I slowed the car, peering down the path, and felt this cold prickle at the base of my neck, like the air itself was warning me to turn around. But I didn't listen. I took the left. For the first few minutes, it was just more dark road and thick fog. The trees grew denser, their branches clawing at the sky like brittle fingers. My headlights barely cut through the mist, and the deeper I went, the quieter everything became. No crickets, no wind, just the soft hum of the engine and the crunch of my tires on the gravel. Then I saw it, a figure standing in the middle of the road. I slammed on the brakes, the car skidding slightly on the gravel. My heart jumped into my throat as I squinted through the windshield, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. It was a person, or at least it looked like one. They were tall and thin, draped in what looked like old, ragged clothes that hung off their frame. Their head was tilted at an unnatural angle, as if their neck couldn't quite support the weight. And they were facing away from me, standing perfectly still in the center of the road. I sat there for a moment, gripping the wheel, unsure of what to do. "Hey," I called through the window, my voice shaky. "Are you okay?" They didn't move. The longer I sat there, the more I felt like I'd made a mistake. Something about the figure was off. Too still, too quiet, like it wasn't really alive. I inched the car forward, hoping they'd move out of the way. But just as the headlights swept across them, the figure turned. And that's when I saw the face. It wasn't a person. Its skin was pale and stretched too tight, as if it had been pulled over a skull that didn't quite fit. The eyes were empty holes, blacker than the night around us. And the mouth, God, the mouth was a gaping slit filled with jagged, uneven teeth. It smiled, and then it took a step toward the car. I panicked, slammed the car into reverse, and hit the gas. The tires spun for a second before catching, and I shot backward, heart racing, pulse thudding in my ears. The thing in the road didn't run after me. It just stood there, that awful smile stretched across its face, watching me. I kept reversing until I reached the fork again. Without thinking, I swerved onto the other road and gunned it, desperate to get as far away from that thing as possible. My hands were shaking, and I could barely keep the wheel steady. After a few miles, the fog started to thin, and the road opened up into fields again. I took a few deep breaths, trying to calm down, telling myself that whatever I'd seen was just, I don't know, a trick of the light? Maybe someone playing a prank? But deep down, I knew it wasn't. I drove the rest of the way home in a daze, my brain replaying the sight of that face over and over. When I finally got back to my apartment, I parked the car, locked every door, and sat on my couch, too rattled to sleep. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. The next day, I went out to get groceries. When I unlocked the car and slid into the driver's seat, I froze. There was something on the windshield. At first, I thought it was a leaf or a smudge from the night before. But when I leaned closer, my stomach turned to ice. It was a handprint, not a normal handprint either. The fingers were too long, and the palm was too narrow, like whatever had left it wasn't entirely human. I wiped it off with my sleeve, telling myself it was just dirt. But as I backed out of the parking space, I caught a glimpse of something in the rearview mirror. A figure standing at the far end of the lot. It was the same thing from the road. It didn't move. It didn't chase me. It just stood there watching, with that same awful smile stretched across its face. I haven't driven on any back road since that night. Hell, I barely drive at night at all anymore. But here's the worst part. Every now and then, I still see it. Not on the road, not out in the country. I see it in reflections, in store windows, in the glass of a subway car, even in the black screen of my phone when it's off. It's never there when I turn around, just watching me from the glass. And every time I see it, the smile gets wider. I know it's waiting for something, and I'm terrified that one day I'll look into a reflection and it won't be on the other side anymore. You know what should be outlawed first? Airline seat shrinkage. Have you noticed how every flight feels like you're being packed into a Pringles can with other sweaty, exhausted humans? I swear, the last time I flew economy, the seats were so close together I had to choose between breathing and keeping my knees attached to my body. If the guy in front of me reclined his seat even half an inch more, he would have been in my lap, and we'd have had to exchange vows. It's beyond ridiculous. Airlines pretend it's about efficiency, but we all know it's a money grab. The way they squeeze us in, you'd think they're loading livestock, not people. And somehow, legroom has become a luxury. Like, sorry, only the rich get to feel their lower extremities by the end of a flight. Meanwhile, they charge you extra for everything. Carry-on, snacks, even choosing your seat in advance. I paid $30 just to avoid getting stuck in the middle seat between two strangers with questionable hygiene. I swear, if the flight had been delayed another hour, I'd have been billed for air. And speaking of nonsense that should be banned, vague deadlines at the DMV. You go to renew your license, and they tell you something like, it'll arrive in the mail in 7 to 10 business days. What does that even mean? Is it 7 days or 10? Or is it 70? Because let me tell you, I've waited so long for government documents that by the time they show up, I've already forgotten I ordered them. Last time, I felt like I was living through a time capsule. I opened the envelope expecting a license, and instead found my youthful optimism and dreams of early retirement inside. It's always the same song and dance with these agencies. You wait forever, call for an update, and get hit with, "We appreciate your patience." Oh, do you? That makes one of us. I'm convinced they have a special training course where employees practice how to sound polite while doing absolutely nothing helpful. The only thing they're efficient at is letting you know their phone lines are experiencing higher than usual call volume. Yeah, no kidding, probably because everything takes 10 times longer than it should. And speaking of things that take too long, can we outlaw endless group chats? You know the ones I mean, the chats that never die. It could be a thread for planning brunch that somehow drags on for months, or worse, a work group chat where someone feels the need to message at midnight. I recently had a group chat spiral into chaos over pizza toppings of all things. One minute we're deciding between pepperoni and mushrooms, and the next, Karen is sharing photos of her dog in a Halloween costume. How do we get here? Who allowed this? Group chats should have an expiration date. If the chat hasn't served a real purpose in 48 hours, it gets nuked automatically. Done. No more awkward who leaves first standoffs. No more random notifications when someone sends a thumbs up 3 weeks too late. And no more midnight. Can you all see this attachment? Text from Greg. Greg, if I didn't see it the first time, I'm definitely not checking it at 12:14 a.m. on a Tuesday. Oh, and while we're on the topic of things that need to die, those extended warranty calls. I don't know how they found me, but it's like these scammers have a sixth sense for exactly when I'm busiest. The other day, I was in the middle of a Zoom meeting, trying to sound like I knew what I was doing, and bam, this is a courtesy call about your car's extended warranty. I don't even own the car they're talking about. In fact, I'm pretty sure I never did. At this point, I'm convinced they just make up cars to scam people. Hello, we're calling about the warranty on your 2011 Jetstream XR. What even is a Jetstream XR? Sounds like a fighter jet. Honestly, if these people put half as much effort into real jobs as they do into scamming us, they'd probably cure cancer by now. I've tried everything to escape them, blocking numbers, answering in foreign languages, even screaming exorcism into the phone. Nothing works. They just keep coming like a horror movie villain that can't be killed. If I ever become president, my first executive order will be to make these calls punishable by life in prison. No parole. Just endless phone calls from other inmates about fake warranties. Another thing that needs to go? Mandatory fun at the office. You know what I'm talking about. Those team-building exercises that HR insists will bring us all closer together. No, Janet, playing Trust Fall isn't going to make me forget that Steve still owes me 3 emails. And don't get me started on the forced birthday celebrations. There's always that one person who doesn't want anyone to know it's their birthday, but HR insists on making a big deal out of it. So now we're all standing in the break room, awkwardly singing happy birthday to Todd, who looks like he'd rather be hit by a bus than eat the stale grocery store cake they bought for him. Workplace birthday parties should be a personal choice, not a mandatory social obligation. If Todd wants to spend his birthday quietly ignoring all of us, he should be allowed to do that without being guilt-tripped. The only mandatory thing at work should be, work and maybe free coffee. That's it. And can we finally talk about how absurd it is that water is sold in plastic bottles when tap water is free? If you really think about it, the bottled water industry is the most impressive scam of the century. They're charging us for something we already have, slapping a mountain logo on the label, and calling it premium. And we just go along with it? Imagine if I walked into your kitchen, filled a cup from your tap, and charged you $3 for it. You'd think I was insane. But because it's in a plastic bottle, suddenly it's a lifestyle choice. What's worse is how much plastic waste this nonsense creates. We got entire islands of garbage floating in the ocean, and half of it is probably empty water bottles. I say we ban single-use plastics altogether. If I can bring my own bag to the grocery store, I can bring my own reusable water bottle too. And if someone forgets, tough. Let them drink from a public fountain like it's 1995. We'll survive. Look, the world's a mess. Corporations are robbing us blind. Scammers are lurking behind every phone call, and office parties are still awkward as hell. But if we start outlawing some of this everyday nonsense, maybe, just maybe, we can make life a little more bearable. Or at the very least, we'll have fewer group chats to haunt our phones at 2 a.m. This story is known as the Great Senior Prank Gone Wrong. And it was the moment we realized that sometimes things spiral way faster than you ever expect. It was supposed to be a small, harmless prank, a tradition. But what happened that day will be burned into the memory of every single person who was there. It all started with Mason. Now, Mason wasn't just a class clown. He was the architect of stupidity. He was that kid who could convince you to do anything with a well-timed, "What? Are you scared?" He once dared the entire soccer team to dye their hair green before a big game, and they actually did it. So when Mason came up with the ultimate senior prank, no one questioned him. Which in hindsight was mistake number 1. The plan was simple. We were going to fill the main hallway with balloons. Not just a few balloons, thousands of them. We figured we'd sneak into the school early, pump them up, and release them all at once. By the time the first bell rang, the entire hallway would be a sea of floating chaos. People would laugh, we'd be legends, and nobody would get hurt. Perfect, right? Wrong. It was 4 a.m. when we broke into the school. Mason had somehow convinced his cousin, who worked night shifts as a security guard, to accidentally leave one of the back doors unlocked for us. There were 6 of us, armed with trash bags full of deflated balloons, a portable air pump, and the kind of reckless optimism that only comes from a lack of sleep. We got to work immediately, pumping up balloon after balloon, tossing them into the hallway like we were building some kind of surreal indoor carnival. It was going great. Within 30 minutes, the hallway was filling up fast, and the sound of balloons rubbing against each other echoed through the empty school like rubbery whispers of success. But then Mason, being Mason, decided that filling the hallway wasn't enough. "You know what would make this even better?" he said, grinning like he was about to invent the wheel. "We should add something inside the balloons." "What do you mean?" I asked warily, knowing that nothing good ever followed Mason's grin. "Confetti," he said like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "When they pop, it'll be like a party bomb." Now, any normal person would have shut this down immediately, but we were too far gone. "Sure," someone said. "Why not?" So Mason whipped out a giant bag of confetti. Where the hell he got it, I still don't know, and we started filling random balloons with handfuls of the stuff. We thought it would just sprinkle out a little bit when the balloons popped. It did not. It exploded. The first balloon burst when Mason accidentally sat on it, and it was like a confetti grenade went off. There was glitter in the air, on the walls, in our hair, everywhere. We stood there in stunned silence, blinking through the storm of tiny, sparkly chaos. And that's when we realized we'd just created weapons. Of course, Mason thought this was hilarious. "Guys," he wheezed, "imagine when the teachers try to clean this up. We should have stopped right there. We should have gathered what little dignity we had left and called it quits." But no, we were committed. So, naturally, we decided to fill as many balloons as possible with confetti bombs. What could go wrong? By 6 a.m., the hallway was packed. Balloons were stacked from floor to ceiling, bouncing and squeaking against each other like some kind of inflatable mosh pit. It was beautiful. Mason climbed on top of a pile of balloons, spread his arms wide, and shouted, "Behold, my masterpiece." And then, because the universe has a sense of humor, the fire alarm went off. At first, we thought we were busted. We froze, hearts pounding, waiting for the sound of security guards charging toward us. But instead, the sprinklers in the hallway sputtered to life and unleashed an ocean of water onto the balloons. Now, if you've never seen thousands of balloons get hit with sprinkler water all at once, let me tell you, it's pure chaos. The balloons started popping in rapid succession like machine gun fire, and every time one of the confetti bombs exploded, it sent a cloud of glitter, paper, and tiny stars into the air. Within seconds, the entire hallway looked like a glitter-filled war zone. Balloons were popping left and right. Water was pouring down from the ceiling, and Mason, who was still standing on top of the balloon pile, was cackling like a madman. "This is the greatest day of my life," he shouted, right as a balloon exploded directly in his face, covering him in wet confetti. At that exact moment, the janitor showed up. Poor Mr. Bowers had seen a lot in his 30 years at the school, but nothing could have prepared him for the sight of 6 soaking wet seniors standing in a hallway filled with confetti, screaming balloons, and puddles of water. He just stood there for a second, blinking like he was trying to decide whether this was real life or some kind of fever dream. "What the hell is this?" he finally muttered. Before we could explain or lie, Mr. Bowers just shook his head and walked away, muttering, "I don't get paid enough for this." We thought we were in the clear, but just as we started high-fiving each other, the front doors burst open, and in stormed Principal Jacobs. Jacobs was furious. His face was bright red, and he looked like he was about to explode. "Who is responsible for this?" he shouted, his voice echoing through the balloon-filled hallway. And in that moment, Mason did the dumbest and most legendary thing I've ever seen. He raised his hand, grinned, and said, "You're welcome." Jacobs just stared at him, completely speechless. For a moment, it looked like he was going to have a stroke. But then, something miraculous happened. He laughed. Not just a polite chuckle, a full-on belly laugh. Jacobs doubled over, hands on his knees, laughing so hard that tears streamed down his face. I can't even," he gasped, trying to catch his breath. "This is the dumbest thing I've ever seen." And just like that, the tension broke. The teachers who had followed him into the hallway started laughing too. Even Mr. Bowers cracked a smile, shaking his head as he grabbed his mop. In the end, no one got suspended. No one even got detention. Jacobs made us help clean up the mess, which took hours, but he couldn't stop grinning the whole time. "This," he said, sweeping a pile of wet glitter into a trash bag, "will go down in history." And it did. To this day, whenever someone mentions senior pranks, someone always says, "Remember the balloons?" And Mason? Mason just leans back in his chair, grins like the Cheshire Cat, and says, "Told you." Instant party. I was in the shower, minding my own business, when the universe decided it was time for a wake-up call. I'm talking about the kind of moment that makes you reevaluate every dumb decision you've ever made in your life. And all I did was slip on a bar of soap. I know. Slipping in the shower sounds like the setup to a cartoon gag or something your grandma warns you about after forwarding you a chain email. But let me tell you, there's nothing funny about it when it happens in real life. 1 second, I was shampooing my hair, feeling like a damn Herbal Essences commercial. And the next, I was airborne, feet shooting out from under me like a cartoon character stepping on a banana peel. You'd think that falling would give you time to process things like, "Oh no, I'm falling. Better brace myself." No, it's like the universe hit fast forward. 1 second I was upright, and the next I was horizontal, free falling towards solid porcelain with the kind of speed you normally only see in skydiving videos. My shoulder hit the wall first, this awful, bone-cracking thud that echoed like a gunshot in the tiny bathroom. I didn't even have time to scream before my head followed, slamming into the side of the tub with a sharp, metallic clang. The pain was immediate and blinding, like someone had stuffed fireworks into my skull and set them off all at once. The world blurred at the edges, and for a terrifying moment, I wasn't sure which way was up. My limbs flailed uselessly, trying to find something to grab, but the wet tiles were as slick as ice. I remember thinking, this is how people die. Not in car accidents or dangerous stunts, just stupid, everyday shit like taking a shower. When my head hit the tub, everything went silent for a moment, like the universe pressed mute. Then came the ringing, a high-pitched, brain-piercing whine that drowned out every other sound. My vision swam with spots of black and white, and for a second I thought, this is it. This is how I go out. Naked, wet, and concussed. I must have blacked out for a few seconds because when I opened my eyes again, I was sprawled halfway out of the tub, one leg dangling over the side like I'd just fallen off a bar stool. My whole body felt heavy and sluggish, like I'd been drugged. I could taste blood in my mouth, warm and metallic, and when I touched my scalp, my fingers came away red. My first thought was, great. Now I'm going to bleed to death in the bathroom. My second thought was, at least I'm clean. The absurdity of it almost made me laugh, but the pain in my head made sure I didn't. I tried to sit up, but my body had other plans. Every muscle in my neck and shoulders screamed in protest, and the room tilted violently to one side. It was like trying to walk on a spinning carnival ride, except the ride was my bathroom, and the prize was probably a trip to the ER. It took me a full minute to realize that I needed help. The phone was in the other room, on the nightstand, and there was no way in hell I was going to make it there without falling over again. So I did the only thing I could think of. I yelled. Well, more like groaned loudly. Help! It sounded pathetic, even to my own ears. I tried again, louder this time, hoping that anyone, would hear me. Luckily, my roommate, Jake, was home. The poor guy burst into the bathroom like he was responding to a hostage situation. His eyes widened when he saw me, a naked, bleeding mess sprawled out in the tub like a crime scene. Jesus Christ, what the hell happened? He shouted, hovering awkwardly near the doorway. Are you okay? Do I look okay? I hissed, trying to sit up again. Bad idea. My head throbbed in protest, and I winced, clutching my skull. I slipped the soap. Jake stood there, frozen for a second, clearly unsure whether to laugh or panic. Okay, should I call 911 or something? Just give me a towel first, man. He grabbed a towel from the rack and tossed it to me like he was defusing a bomb. I wrapped it around my waist as best as I could, though at that point, dignity was the least of my concerns. Jake helped me out of the tub. Well, more like he dragged me, and I sat on the floor, my head resting against the cold tiles. Dude, you're bleeding, Jake said, stating the obvious as he grabbed his phone. You might need stitches. Yeah, no shit, I muttered, pressing the towel to my head to slow the bleeding. Remind me to sue the soap company. Jake snorted, shaking his head. Only you could almost kill yourself with a bar of Dove. The ambulance ride was a blur. By the time we got to the hospital, the adrenaline had worn off, leaving me with a pounding headache and a sore neck. The doctor confirmed what I already knew. Mild concussion, no fractures, but I needed a few stitches to close the gash on my head. They patched me up and sent me home with instructions to rest and avoid any sudden movements. Easier said than done when your brain feels like it's been scrambled with a whisk. Jake was kind enough to set me up on the couch with an ice pack and some painkillers, but not before giving me endless shit about my near-death experience. Seriously, man, he said, grinning like an idiot. Of all the ways to go, slipping on soap? That's impressive. I gave him the finger, which only made him laugh harder. For the next few days, every time I moved too quickly, my head would spin, and I'd have to sit down until the world stopped tilting. The bruise on my shoulder turned this nasty shade of purple and green, like I'd been in a bar fight with the Hulk. And the worst part? Every time I showered, I couldn't stop thinking about how close I'd come to cracking my skull open for real. I got a non-slip mat after that, and a shower stool, and one of those grippy handles you see in old people's bathrooms. Call me paranoid, but I'd rather look like an 80-year-old than end up in the ER again. It's weird, though. That fall messed with my head more than I expected, not just physically, but mentally. I keep thinking about how fragile everything is, how it only takes one stupid second to change everything. One slip, one mistake, and you're done. I still catch myself checking the soap bar sometimes, like it's going to leap off the shelf and finish what it started. Because that's the thing about close calls, you never really get over them. They just sit there in the back of your mind, a constant reminder that life can turn on a dime. And all it takes is one wrong step. It was nearly 2 a.m. when the text buzzed on my phone. I'm outside. No name, no explanation, just 2 words. But I knew who it was before I even checked. It had to be Adam. I stared at the screen for a moment, debating whether to respond. We hadn't spoken in months, not since the last time I told him I needed space. He said he understood. He didn't. Adam was never the kind of person to wait patiently. He was the kind who showed up at your door when you least expected it, hoping you'd open it. Part of me wanted to leave him out there, let him sit in the cold with the weight of all the things we hadn't said between us. But another part, the part that still remembered what it felt like to have him around, made me grab my hoodie and head to the door. When I stepped outside, there he was leaning against his old car, looking just like I remembered. Same messy black hair, same worn-out leather jacket, same restless energy, like he was always 2 steps away from running or crashing. Hey, he said, smiling like we'd just seen each other yesterday. Hey, I replied, crossing my arms. You really shouldn't be here. I know. He shoved his hands into his pockets and rocked back on his heels. But here I am anyway. That was Adam. Always just there, whether you asked for it or not. So, what do you want? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He tilted his head, grinning that stupid grin that had always made it impossible to stay mad at him. Come for a drive with me. I let out a short laugh. Are you serious? Dead serious. He looked at me like he used to, like the rules didn't matter as long as we had a car and an open road. One drive. No questions. Just us. I shook my head, but I could already feel myself caving. Adam always had that effect, like gravity pulling you in, even when you knew better. Fine, I said with a sigh. But if this is some elaborate plan to drag me to Taco Bell, I swear. He threw his head back and laughed, that loud, ridiculous laugh that could fill any empty space. No Taco Bell. Promise. We climbed into his car, and just like that, it felt like old times again. The worn seats smelled faintly of cigarettes and cheap cologne, and the dashboard was cluttered with half-empty water bottles and crumpled receipts. Adam pulled out of the driveway, and the city lights blurred behind us as we hit the highway. The radio hummed softly in the background, playing some indie song I didn't recognize. For a while, we didn't talk. We just drove, the road stretching out before us like it had no end, the wind slipping in through the cracked windows. It was the kind of silence that felt like a conversation in itself. Comfortable, familiar, and full of things neither of us knew how to say. "Do you remember that night we drove out to the quarry?" Adam asked suddenly, breaking the quiet. I smiled despite myself. "Yeah, you tried to jump off the ledge and chicken out at the last second." "I didn't chicken out," he protested, grinning. "I was thinking. You were scared shitless." He laughed, drumming his fingers on the steering wheel. "Okay, yeah, maybe a little, but so were you." "I still jumped, though." "You always do," he said quietly, and there was something in his voice, something softer than I remembered, that made me glance over at him. For once, he wasn't smiling. The road stretched on, empty and endless, and I realized that maybe this wasn't just a nostalgia trip for him. "Why'd you really come, Adam?" I asked, my voice low. He exhaled, long and slow, gripping the wheel a little tighter. "I don't know," he admitted. I missed you." I swallowed hard, the words landing heavier than I expected. "I know I messed up," he continued, eyes fixed on the road. "I've been thinking about it for months, how I should have stayed, how I should have been better." His words hung between us, raw and unfinished. Like an apology he hadn't figured out how to give until now. I wanted to say something, anything that might make it easier, but the truth was, I'd missed him too, and that scared the hell out of me. "Adam," I started, but the words got stuck somewhere in my throat. He glanced over at me, his smile small and a little sad. "You don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know." We drove in silence after that, the weight of his confession sitting quietly between us. At some point, Adam pulled off the highway and onto a back road, the car slowing to a crawl as we entered a stretch of open fields. He turned off the headlights, and the world outside was swallowed by darkness, broken only by the faint glow of stars scattered across the sky. He rolled down the windows, and the cool night air rushed in, carrying the scent of wet grass and earth. "Do you remember what you said to me that night at the quarry?" he asked softly. I closed my eyes, the memory washing over me like a wave. "It's okay to be scared," I told him. "You just have to jump anyway." I felt him shift beside me, and when I opened my eyes, he was looking at me, really looking at me like he was trying to memorize every detail. "I never told you this," he whispered, "but you were always the brave one." My heart twisted in my chest, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. "I didn't feel brave," I admitted. "Not with you." He smiled, soft and a little sad. "Maybe not, but you were." We sat there, parked in the middle of nowhere, with the stars above us and the road behind us. And for the first time in a long while, it felt like maybe we were exactly where we were supposed to be. No more running. No more waiting. Just here. After a while, Adam leaned back in his seat, letting out a long sigh. "You think we'll ever get it right?" I thought about it, about all the ways we'd fallen apart and found our way back to each other over and over again. "Probably not," I said with a small laugh. "But maybe that's not the point." He smiled at that, really smiled. And for the first time in months, I felt something inside me unclench. We stayed out there until the horizon started to lighten, the first hints of dawn stretching across the sky. And when Adam finally turned the key in the ignition and the engine hummed to life, I knew that whatever happened next, whether we drifted apart again or stayed right here, we'd be okay. Because sometimes, all you need is one more drive, one more night, one more chance to say the things you should have said the first time. And for now, that was enough. It started with good intentions. I'd planned to stay in. No drinks, no drama, just a quiet night with a takeout burrito and some half-watched Netflix show. I even lit a candle, as if that would somehow keep me from caving to the itch to go out. But somewhere around 9 p.m., just as I was convincing myself that staying home was self-care, my phone buzzed. "We're at that new bar. Get your ass over here." I stared at the message for a full minute, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. I knew I shouldn't. I knew exactly how the night would go if I went. How it always goes. But the idea of staying in my apartment alone, scrolling through Instagram, and pretending I was happy with it, that felt worse. Fine. One drink. I typed back, already knowing it was a lie. By 10:15, I was in an Uber, tugging at the hem of a dress that felt a little too short but made me look like I had my life together. The bar was buzzing when I walked in, one of those sleek places where the lighting is so dim it's hard to tell if someone's actually attractive or if they just know how to stand in the shadows. I scanned the room, spotting my friends clustered near the back, already tipsy and laughing like they owned the night. I told myself I'd stay for an hour, 2 at most. Then I'd head home, crawl into bed, and wake up without a hangover or regret. And then I saw him. He was sitting at the far end of the bar, swirling his drink lazily, like he had nowhere else to be. He wasn't flashy, no loud shirt, no obnoxious swagger. Just a guy in a worn leather jacket with this quiet kind of confidence that said, I don't need to be noticed, but you'll notice me anyway. Our eyes met, and he gave me a small, lazy grin. It wasn't a grin that asked, Are you coming over? It was a grin that said, You already are. And of course I did. I slid onto the bar stool next to him, resting my elbow on the bar. What are we drinking to? I asked, as if I'd just stumbled into him by accident. He tilted his head slightly, like he was sizing me up. How about to unexpected nights? There it was, that spark, that feeling you get when you know, deep down, that whatever comes next is going to leave a mark, whether you want it to or not. We started talking. He wasn't loud or showy, but there was an ease to him, the kind of guy who knows how to keep the conversation light, but leaves just enough space between words to make you lean in. We talked about music, books, places we'd been or wanted to go. Nothing particularly deep, but just real enough to feel good. I could feel the night shifting around us, the unspoken invitation hanging in the air. His hand brushed mine once, light, accidental, and the contact sent a shiver through me. You want to get out of here? He asked, his voice low, casual, as if it didn't matter either way. But it did. We both knew it did. I nodded. Yeah, let's go. The walk to his place was fast and full of tension, our bodies moving close but not quite touching, like two magnets that hadn't fully given in yet. By the time we made it to his door, we were already on each other, kissing hard, hands everywhere, bumping into walls and laughing like idiots. His apartment was small but neat, the kind of place that belongs to someone who lives lightly without much attachment. We didn't waste any time. Clothes hit the floor, and we tumbled into his bed, tangled in sheets that smelled faintly of cedar and laundry detergent. The sex was good, messy and urgent in that way that only happens when two people are trying to burn as bright as possible, knowing full well the fire will be gone by morning. For a few hours, it felt perfect. Just skin and heat and the sweet, fleeting relief of not thinking too much. And then, of course, morning came. I woke up to the sound of the city outside his window. Cars honking, someone yelling, the world going about its business. His arm was slung over me, heavy and warm, and for a second, I thought about staying, about curling into him and pretending, just for a little longer, that this was something more than what it was. But mornings always bring clarity. And the clarity was this. It didn't matter how good the night had been. It was still just a night. I slid out from under his arm, careful not to wake him, and started gathering my clothes. There's something surreal about getting dressed in the dim light of a stranger's room. The way the same dress that made you feel unstoppable the night before now feels like armor you can't wait to shed. I was almost out the door when I heard him stir behind me. Leaving already? He murmured, his voice thick with sleep. I turned, giving him a small smile that felt more like an apology. Yeah, got an early start. He gave me that lazy grin again, the one that had pulled me in so easily the night before. It was a good night, he said, stretching lazily under the sheets. Yeah, I whispered. It was. And just like that, it was over. The walk to the curb felt longer than it should have, the cold morning air biting at my skin. I wrapped my coat tighter around me, but it didn't help. The chill wasn't just outside. It was inside me too, that familiar ache that always shows up after nights like these. The Uber ride home was filled with the kind of silence that forces you to sit with every thought you'd been trying to avoid. I stared out the window, watching the world pass by, and told myself it was fine, that this was what I wanted. That one night with no strings was better than the complications of wanting something more. But the truth sat heavy in my chest, impossible to shake. It wasn't about him. It never is. It was about me, about the pattern I keep falling into, hoping that one of these fleeting moments will finally stick, only to find that they never do. I got home, kicked off my shoes, and collapsed onto my bed, too tired to even change. The ceiling stared back at me, blank and indifferent, as if waiting for me to figure out what the hell I was doing with my life. I wish I could say this was the last time, that I finally learned how to stop chasing something that always slips away in the morning. But the truth? I'll probably do it again, because as much as I hate the mornings after, I hate the silence even more. Maybe someday, I'll stop. Maybe I'll figure out how to sit with the silence without needing someone else to fill it. Or maybe I won't. Maybe I'll just keep going one night at a time, hoping that eventually, one of these mornings will feel different. But until then, all I can do is keep moving forward. One drink, one kiss, one morning after the next. It all started when I decided to vacuum. Not because I'm someone who cleans regularly. No, it was one of those spur-of-the-moment decisions where you suddenly hate the state of your apartment and convince yourself that vacuuming will fix your entire life. My brain was like a clean floor will solve everything. It's science. So I pulled the vacuum out of the closet, a clunky old thing I got secondhand and have a weird love-hate relationship with. The cord's too short, and it makes a noise like it's trying to swallow a blender, but it still works. Kind of. I plugged it in, flipped the switch, and immediately felt that surge of productivity you only get during the first 30 seconds of a cleaning spree. Things are going fine at first. Crumbs, cat hair, weird dust clumps that I could pretend weren't mine. Everything was getting sucked up. I even started to hum a little, feeling like maybe, just maybe, I had this whole adulthood thing under control. And then I vacuumed the shoelace. I didn't see it in time, just heard that horrifying RRRNK noise as the vacuum choked on it. I scrambled to turn it off, but by the time I did, the shoelace was already half swallowed, tangled deep in the brush roller like spaghetti in a blender. Of course, I muttered, crouching down to assess the damage. The lace was wound so tight it looked like the vacuum was holding it hostage. I tried pulling it free, but the roller wasn't budging. This wasn't going to be a quick fix. I flipped the vacuum on its side, grabbed the only tool I could think of, a butter knife, and started prying at the roller like an idiot. The shoelace refused to move. It was as if the vacuum had claimed it as tribute and would not be releasing it without a fight. After 5 minutes of stabbing and tugging, I realized I was stuck. This wasn't just about a shoelace anymore. This was about pride. I couldn't let the vacuum win. So I did what any sensible person would do. I gave up on the butter knife and went to YouTube. There are roughly 500,000 videos on how to fix a clogged vacuum. And I swear they all start with the same soothing British guy saying, "Don't worry, this is an easy fix." Lies. All lies. I fast-forwarded through 3 different videos, trying to find a solution that didn't involve disassembling the entire machine like I was rebuilding a car engine. No luck. At this point, I was getting sweaty and angry like one of those people on survival shows who gets irrationally mad at firewood. I yanked at the shoelace again, harder this time, and in my frustration, I accidentally pulled the entire vacuum cord out of the socket. The plug whipped back and smacked me in the shin with the force of a rubber band from hell. "Perfect," I hissed, rubbing my leg. My cat, who had been watching the whole disaster unfold from the safety of the couch, gave me a look that said, "You're embarrassing both of us." I sat there on the floor, surrounded by crumbs and cat hair, tangled in a shoelace/vacuum standoff, wondering how my life had come to this. I was just trying to clean. That's all I wanted. But somehow, the universe had decided that I was not worthy of a clean floor today. After a few more minutes of struggling and briefly considering throwing the entire vacuum off my balcony, I managed to wrestle the shoelace free. It came loose with a sad little pop, like the vacuum was disappointed to let it go. I held the lace up in victory, breathing heavily, as if I'd just defeated an enemy in battle. The roller was now completely jammed with hair, lint, and the remnants of what I can only assume was a past life. I spent another 10 minutes cutting it all loose with scissors, muttering dark things under my breath like some kind of disgruntled wizard performing a curse-lifting ritual. When I finally got the vacuum working again, I stood up, plugged it back in, and flipped the switch. It roared to life, the brush rollers spinning happily, as if nothing had ever gone wrong. I vacuumed the rest of the apartment in angry silence. Not because I wanted to, but because I refused to let the vacuum win. This was no longer about cleanliness. This was about proving that I could finish what I started. When I was done, I wrapped the cord around the vacuum with unnecessary force, stuffed it back into the closet, and slammed the door shut. The floor looked fine. Not great, but at least the shoelace was free, and the crumbs were gone. I flopped onto the couch, exhausted, feeling like I'd just run a marathon for absolutely no reason. My cat jumped up next to me, kneaded my thigh a little too aggressively, and settled in with a sigh, as if to say, glad that's over. I stared at the freshly vacuumed floor and tried to feel accomplished, but mostly I just felt tired. That's the thing no one tells you about being an adult. Even the small victories feel suspiciously like defeat. And yet, I'd done it. I'd conquered the shoelace. And sure, the process had been an absolute nightmare, but the crumbs were gone, and that was something. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through social media, looking for a meme that might validate the absurdity of my day. I found one that said, being an adult is just saying, after this week, things will slow down, over and over until you die. I laughed way too hard at that. And maybe that's the trick, I thought, accepting that life is mostly just stuff like this. Tangled shoelaces, stubborn vacuums, cat hair everywhere. Some days the mess wins. But other days, you fight through it one butter knife at a time. And if you're lucky, maybe, just maybe, you'll end up with a clean floor. This was supposed to be just another road trip. You know, one of those spur-of-the-moment decisions when your friends hit you up late at night, and you're like, why the hell not? I was 19, it was summer, and the plan was to drive down the coast, crash at some cheap motels, and hit as many beaches as possible. No real itinerary, just the thrill of the open road. There were 4 of us, me, my buddy Alex, and 2 friends from high school, Sarah and Jess. It was all good until the last night of the trip. We decided to push a bit further inland to camp out somewhere cheap. Alex had found this spot online, some lake in the middle of nowhere, supposedly gorgeous, with hardly any other visitors. We thought it sounded perfect. Looking back, I don't know what the hell we were thinking. The drive out there was longer than expected. We were blasting music, messing around, until at some point, the paved road ended, and we found ourselves on a narrow dirt trail. It wasn't marked, and our phone signals were spotty at best, but the GPS insisted this was the way. Eventually, we pulled up to the lake, which was more like a big, muddy pond. The place was completely deserted. No cabins, no ranger station, not even a sign. Just dense trees crowding in from every side, and the sky turning dark way too fast. Guys, Jess muttered as she stared out the window. This is kinda creepy. Nah, Alex said, waving her off. This is perfect. No people, no noise. Just nature. We got out, unloaded our stuff, and pitched the tent right by the water. The air was heavy, and the trees around the lake were oddly still. Not even the usual chirping of crickets. I tried to shake off the weird vibe. It was probably just the isolation messing with me, but I couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling in my gut. Something felt off. After we set up camp, we cracked open a few beers and tried to relax. The 4 of us sat around the fire, telling dumb jokes and roasting marshmallows. For a little while it was fine, peaceful even, but then Sarah noticed something, or rather, the absence of something. Guys, she whispered, leaning forward, where's the moon? We all looked up. The sky was pitch black. No stars, no moon, just endless darkness. I checked my phone, thinking maybe it was just a cloudy night, but the weather app showed clear skies. The temperature started dropping fast, too, like someone had flipped a switch. 1 minute, it was warm and humid, and the next, I could see my breath hanging in the air. All right, that's weird, Alex admitted, tossing another log onto the fire. The flames sputtered like they were struggling to stay alive, despite the fresh wood. Then we heard it, a faint splash from the lake. We all froze. It wasn't a fish jumping either. It was slow, deliberate, like something heavy had just slipped beneath the surface. Jess grabbed my arm, and I could feel her trembling. Probably just an animal, Alex said, trying to sound casual, but I could hear the waver in his voice. Another splash, closer this time. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I grabbed my flashlight, shined it towards the water, and that's when I saw it. A ripple. Just a single ripple, spreading across the glassy surface. But what made my stomach drop was the fact that there was nothing there to cause it. No fish, no animal, no floating log. Just water. And then the ripple stopped, like the lake had suddenly frozen solid. "We should go," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. Alex tried to argue, but none of us were listening. We scrambled to pack up, fumbling in the dark, hands shaking as we shoved sleeping bags and beer cans into backpacks. That's when the fire went out. Just like that, gone snuffed out in an instant, leaving us in total darkness. And then we heard it again, the splash. Except this time, it wasn't in the lake. It was behind us in the woods. I swear to God, it sounded like something dragging itself out of the water. Wet, heavy footsteps squelched against the muddy shore, heading straight for us. "Run!" I screamed, grabbing Jess's hand, and we bolted for the car. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could hear whatever it was, sloshing and thudding behind us, faster than anything that size had a right to be. We reached the car, and Alex fumbled with the keys, swearing under his breath. The sound was closer now, almost right on top of us. I yanked open the back door, shoved Jess and Sarah inside, and screamed at Alex to drive. He floored it. The tires spun in the mud for a second, and I thought we were done for, but then we lurched forward, fishtailing down the dirt trail. I glanced out the back window just once, and immediately wished I hadn't. There was something standing at the edge of the lake. Tall, thin, with limbs too long and skin that glistened in the moonlight that hadn't been there a moment ago. Its eyes, huge and black, stared right at me, unblinking. And as we sped away, it did something that will haunt me forever. It smiled. I didn't sleep that night. Hell, I didn't sleep for days. When we finally made it back to town, none of us spoke about what happened. It was like an unspoken agreement. If we didn't talk about it, maybe it wouldn't be real. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear those wet footsteps in my dreams. And every so often, I wonder what would have happened if we'd stayed just a few minutes longer. Something tells me it was waiting for us to find out. We met at a wedding. I know, it sounds like the setup for a romantic comedy. Two strangers locked in a perfect moment, surrounded by fairy lights and champagne. But life rarely plays out like the movies, and nothing about this story ends with a happily ever after. Still, it felt magical at the time. He was sitting 2 seats away from me at the reception, grinning like he was already having the time of his life. Somewhere between the first toast and the second bottle of wine, we started talking. I don't even remember how it began. Just that suddenly, it was the two of us, lost in our own little conversation bubble while the rest of the world danced around us. He was easy to talk to in that rare, effortless way that makes you forget your usual anxieties. He had this way of making everything feel lighter, like nothing mattered as much when he was around. I like that about him. Too much, probably. When the night ended, he asked if I wanted to grab a drink sometime, and for once, I didn't hesitate. "Sure," I said, and just like that, the wheels were set in motion. Our first date was simple. A couple of drinks at a quiet bar with mismatched furniture and dim lighting. We sat close, shoulders brushing, and talked about everything from our favorite movies to the weird quirks we'd picked up during lockdown. He made me laugh, really laugh, like it had been a long time since I found anything genuinely funny. It felt easy in a way that scared me because nothing in my life had ever stayed easy for long. But I let myself lean into it, just this once. After that, we started seeing each other regularly. It wasn't anything dramatic, just a steady unfolding of moments that made me feel like maybe, finally, I'd found someone who wouldn't leave. He was thoughtful in the quietest ways, remembering the little things I told him, making me playlists of obscure songs he thought I'd like, showing up with coffee just the way I liked it. And for the first time in a long time, I stopped waiting for things to fall apart. I let myself believe in the possibility of something real. But then, slowly, the cracks started to show. It wasn't anything obvious at first. Just a few missed texts, a couple of last-minute cancellations. "Sorry, work's been crazy," he'd say, and I'd tell myself it was normal. Relationships aren't perfect, right? People get busy, but the distance between us kept growing, inch by inch, until I felt like I was holding on to a version of him that no longer existed. I tried not to panic. I gave him space, told myself to be patient, but every time I reached out, he felt further away. Conversations that used to flow so easily now felt strained, like we were both trying too hard to recapture something that had already slipped through our fingers. One night, we were supposed to have dinner at his place. I spent the whole day looking forward to it, excited to just sit with him, talk, and feel close again. But an hour before I was supposed to arrive, he sent a text. "Can we rain check? I'm not really up for company tonight." I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the message, trying to ignore the familiar ache settling in my chest. I knew what was happening, had seen it before, lived it before. The slow fade, the quiet disappearance. The kind where someone leaves without really leaving, dragging it out until there's nothing left but silence. I texted back, "Sure, no worries." But it wasn't fine. It wasn't fine at all. That night, I lay awake, replaying everything in my head, trying to figure out what went wrong. I told myself to give him a little more time, a little more space. But deep down, I knew. I knew that space was just another word for goodbye. A few days later, I called him. I needed to hear it from him. Needed him to say out loud what I already knew in my heart. When he picked up, his voice was warm, familiar, like nothing was wrong. "Hey," he said, like he hadn't been slowly disappearing from my life. "Can we talk?" I asked, my voice barely steady. He paused, and I could feel the weight of everything unsaid hanging between us. "Yeah," he said quietly. "What's on your mind?" I took a deep breath. "I need to know if you're still in this," I said. "Because if you're not, it's okay. I just need you to be honest with me." There was another long pause, and I could hear him exhale on the other end of the line. "I don't know," he said finally. "I thought I could do this, but maybe I can't." And just like that, it was over. I whispered, "Okay." It was all I could manage. There was nothing left to say. After we hung up, I sat there in the quiet of my apartment, feeling the weight of it all settle over me like a heavy blanket. It wasn't just the loss of him. It was the loss of everything I'd let myself believe in. The hope, the possibility, the idea that maybe for once things would be different. But they weren't. The next few days felt surreal, like I was floating through my life without really being present. I deleted his number, muted him on social media, told myself it was time to move on. But moving on isn't as simple as people make it seem. Grief doesn't come with a timeline, and closure is a luxury you don't always get. Some nights, I catch myself scrolling through old messages, wondering if I missed something, some sign, some warning that could have prepared me for the way it ended. But the truth is, some people leave not because of anything you did, but because they don't know how to stay. And knowing that doesn't make it hurt any less. It's been a few months now, and I'd love to say I'm fully over it, that I've moved on and learned all the lessons I was supposed to learn. But healing isn't linear. Some days I feel okay, grateful even for the brief time we had. Other days, the sadness creeps back in, uninvited, and I find myself missing him all over again. But here's the thing. I know now that I'll be okay. Not right away, and not all at once. But eventually. Because as much as it hurts to lose someone, it hurts even more to lose yourself trying to hold on to them. And I've done that before. I won't do it again. These days, I'm learning how to be okay on my own, how to build a life I love, piece by piece, without waiting for someone else to complete it. I still believe in love, but I've learned that the most important kind of love is the one you give yourself. So I'll keep going, one step at a time, one breath at a time, and if love finds me again, I'll be ready. But this time, I'll know that no matter what happens, I am enough. With or without someone else, I am enough. And that, I've realized, is the kind of peace no one can take away from me. This story starts on a summer afternoon at the dog park. Now, I don't have a dog. Important detail. But my buddy was out of town, and he asked if I could take his golden retriever, Max, out for a bit. Max is basically a walking magnet for attention. Like, you could be the least charismatic person in the world. Hello, it's me. And people will still stop to coo over this dog like it's a newborn baby. So I think, hey, this could be my moment. Not in a manipulative way, just like maybe Max would help ease my way into some natural conversations. You know, smooth as butter. Anyway, we're at the park. Max is running around like he's training for the Dog Olympics, and I spot this girl sitting on a bench reading a book. She had this chilled-out vibe. Hair in a messy bun, oversized sunglasses, sipping iced coffee, the works. And bonus points, she was sitting alone, which in my mind was like the universe giving me the green light. Max, like the wingman I didn't deserve, trots over to her, wagging his tail like a professional people-pleaser. She looks up from her book, and boom, she lights up. "Ah, hey buddy," she says, crouching down to pet Max. He leans into her like they've been best friends for years. I stroll over, trying to play it cool, hands in my pockets like I do this every day. "Looks like someone made a new friend," I say. She smiles up at me, and for a split second, I think this is it. I'm killing it right now. "What's his name?" she asks, ruffling Max's ears. "Max," I reply, probably a little too enthusiastically. "He's not mine, actually. Just watching him for a friend." Smooth, right? That's gotta be charming. Shows I'm responsible and kind, right? Well, she seems into it because she chuckles softly and says, "He's adorable." Now here's where things start going downhill. In my mind, I think, okay, time to pivot into casual conversation. I notice her book, and without thinking, I ask, "So, what are you reading?" She tilts the cover up toward me, and it's something like How to Get Over a Narcissist, a Survivor's Guide. And just like that, the mood shifts. I can feel the awkwardness hanging in the air like humidity. But instead of, ignoring it and moving on, my dumb mouth decides to keep going. "Oh wow," I say. "That's light reading, huh?" She gives me a tight-lipped smile. The kind of smile you give when you're being polite, but desperately want someone to go away. But does that stop me? No, sir. I have committed to this interaction like a man speeding toward a brick wall. "You must have, some interesting stories," I add, because clearly if someone is reading that book, they're dying to unpack their emotional trauma to a complete stranger in a dog park. She blinks slowly, as if she's calculating how long she has to humor me before she can get back to her iced coffee and emotional recovery. "Yeah, something like that," she says, her tone drifting somewhere between "please leave" and "how is this happening right now?" At this point, Max, who by the way is thriving, flops on his back, demanding belly rubs like the chaotic neutral that he is. She laughs at Max, clearly more charmed by him than me, which, honestly, I can't even be mad about. But here's where my brain decides, double down, baby. I lean against the bench and try to reel the conversation back in. Well, at least you're getting out and enjoying the day. Nothing like fresh air to clear the mind, right? She just kind of nods, her eyes flicking back to the book like it's her only lifeline. And this is the moment where I should have said something like, "All right, have a great day," and walked off gracefully. But no, instead I decide to go full cringe. So, I say, in what I thought was a flirty tone but probably sounded like a nervous teenager ordering at Starbucks, "If you're free later, maybe Max and I could take you out for a drink." Yup, I invited her on a date with me and a dog that isn't even mine. She stares at me for a second, clearly weighing her options. Finally, she smiles, one of those polite, pitying smiles that makes you wish the earth would just open up beneath your feet. "That's sweet, but I'm actually taking a break from dating," she says, which I now understand is code for absolutely not. Never in a million years. "Oh, of course. No worries at all," I blurt out, trying to salvage the flaming wreckage. "I get it. Breaks are important. You gotta recharge." Recharge? What am I? A therapist for batteries? She gives a polite laugh, probably just to get me out of there, and says, "Anyway, it was nice meeting you." Translation: "Please go away before I have to fake a phone call." So, I give her a little nod, call Max, who does not care one bit that I just tanked harder than a botched rocket launch, and walk away with what's left of my dignity. And just when I think the embarrassment is over, Max decides to stop squat and drop a fresh one right in the middle of the walkway, directly in her line of sight. Now I'm scrambling for one of those little poop bags, cursing under my breath, while she just sits there probably thinking, "Yep, that checks out." As I scoop up Max's contribution to public decorum, I manage to mutter, "Well, enjoy your day," like a total idiot. She waves, and I swear I hear the faintest chuckle as I shuffle away, defeated. So yeah, what did I learn? 1. If someone is reading a self-help book about toxic relationships, maybe don't strike up a conversation unless you have exceptional social skills. 2. Don't invite someone on a date with a borrowed dog. And 3. When the universe gives you an out, take it. Do not linger. Do not try to salvage. Just grab the dog, the poop bag, and what's left of your soul, and walk away. 2 years ago, I crashed my brother's car. He has no idea. He still thinks a tree branch fell on it during a storm, and I've let him believe that. Honestly, the story I came up with was so good, so airtight, that even I almost believe it sometimes. But no, I wrecked it. His pride and joy. His cherry red 2015 Mustang GT. And I have never told anyone. Not him, not my parents, not even my girlfriend. Though every time she brings up that storm, I can feel my skin crawl. See, my brother is obsessed with that car. It's his baby. When we were growing up, he had a picture of a Mustang taped to his bedroom wall like some kids have posters of movie stars. When he finally bought one, he treated it like a newborn. The thing was always waxed and polished, parked diagonally across 2 spaces to avoid door dings. And God help you if you left even a single fingerprint on the hood. He talked about that car like it was a person. No, like it was a member of the family. So you can imagine how bad it was when I wrecked it. And yeah, it was 100% my fault. But in my defense, I didn't mean to drive it. I just wanted to move it a little. It was a summer afternoon, and my brother had gone out of town for the weekend with his girlfriend. I'd swung by his house to feed his cat and water his plants. And as I was heading out, I noticed that his car was parked under this big, drooping branch in the driveway. It looked like a stiff breeze could snap the branch in half, and with storm clouds brewing in the distance, I thought, man, I should probably move the Mustang to the garage. I could have just left it alone, but no, I wanted to be a hero. I told myself I was doing him a favor, saving the Mustang from an inevitable tree branch death. Besides, I thought, how hard could it be to move a car 20 feet? I should mention I'd never driven anything even close to that powerful before. My car at the time was a 2008 Toyota Corolla that wheezed if you tried to accelerate too quickly. But I figured, how different could it be? Cars are cars, right? Wrong. The second I turned the key, the Mustang roared to life like a caged animal. The engine growled so loud it startled me, and in my panic, I tapped the gas a little too hard. That car jumped. It felt like it wanted to launch into orbit. My heart was pounding, but I told myself to relax. I just needed to back it up a little, nice and easy, and park it safely in the garage. I shifted into reverse, took a breath, and yeah, you can probably guess where this is going. I hit the gas way too hard. The car flew backward, tires screeching like they were being tortured. I tried to hit the brakes, but my foot slipped, and instead I rammed straight into a metal trash bin. The Mustang lurched to a stop with a horrible crunch, and in the stunned silence that followed, I just sat there, gripping the steering wheel like it might save me from the hell I just created. I jumped out and ran around to the back, praying it wasn't as bad as it sounded. It was worse. The rear bumper was smashed in, and there were deep scratches along the side where the bin had scraped the paint. It looked like I'd driven through a demolition derby. My first thought was, oh my God, he's going to kill me. My second thought was, how fast can I fake my own death and move to Canada? But instead of fleeing the country, I did something even dumber. I pulled the car into the garage like I'd planned, shut the door, and stood there staring at the damage, trying to figure out how to undo the last 30 seconds of my life. And that's when it hit me. The storm. The storm was my alibi. If I played my cards right, I could make it look like the tree branch had fallen on the car, causing the damage. All I had to do was wait for the storm to hit, and no one would ever know the truth. It was a risky plan, but I was desperate. I grabbed the trash bin, dragged it back to where it belonged, and tried to clean up the skid marks on the driveway. Then I went home, praying the storm would be bad enough to sell my story. That night, the storm came. It wasn't a huge one, but it was good enough. Some wind, some rain, a couple of broken branches scattered around. When my brother came back from his trip the next day, I acted just as shocked as he was when he saw the damage to his car. Damn, I said, shaking my head. Looks like that big branch came down right on the back of it. He bought it. Hook, line, and sinker. We even stood there together, inspecting the damage while the guilt gnawed at my insides like a hungry rat. It's not too bad, I lied. I bet you can buff out those scratches. He was upset, of course. He loved that car. But he wasn't mad at me. He didn't blame anyone. In fact, he was almost philosophical about it. Stuff happens, he said with a shrug. At least it's just a car. I wanted to scream. Just a car? This was the same guy who once cried when a pigeon pooped on the hood. But there he was, acting like the busted bumper was no big deal. And that somehow made me feel even worse. The lie has haunted me ever since. Every time he brings up that storm, like, man, remember when that branch crushed my Mustang? I feel like I'm going to pass out. I've thought about confessing 100 times, but I know I never will. How do you tell someone, hey, remember that accident you've been blaming on Mother Nature? Yeah, that was actually me. There's no good way to say that. So, I carry the secret. I carry it every time I see him polishing that car. Every time he talks about how lucky he was that the storm didn't cause more damage. I carry it every time he lets me borrow his other car, trusting me not to screw it up. And the craziest part? He's never noticed the scratches on the trash bin. He's never asked why there are weird skid marks on the driveway. It's like the universe conspired to protect my dumb ass from getting caught. But the guilt is still there, lurking beneath the surface. Every time I see that Mustang, I feel like it's staring at me, judging me, knowing the truth. I know I'll take this secret to my grave. I'll never tell him, not in a million years. Because in the end, it's not about the car. It's about trust. And if he ever found out what really happened, I know I'd lose more than just his forgiveness. I'd lose his faith in me. And that's a crash I'm not sure I could survive. It didn't feel dangerous at first. In fact, it felt like nothing at all. Just one of those small moments you don't realize matters until it's too late. I'd known Cam's mom, Vanessa, for years. She was always just there. The cool mom. The one who'd let us stay up late playing video games in her basement. The one who made us pancakes the morning after parties without asking too many questions. She was beautiful, sure tall, with wavy black hair and a sharp wit that could cut you down in the nicest way. But she was always Cam's mom, and that put her on the other side of an invisible line. Until it didn't. It started when Cam went on a work trip for 2 weeks, leaving Vanessa alone in the house. She texted me the day after he left, asking if I could come by to help her move some furniture. I didn't think much of it, just being a good friend, helping out. When I got there, she was waiting in the kitchen with 2 glasses of wine. Figured I'd thank you in advance, she said, smiling as she slid one across the counter toward me. I laughed, took the glass, and told myself it was no big deal. But the way she leaned against the counter, the way her eyes flicked to mine just a second too long. Something was different. I felt it, even if I tried to ignore it. We moved the furniture, her directing me while I tried not to think about how good she looked in those yoga pants. When we finished, she insisted I stay for another drink. Come on, she said, tilting her head in that playful way. You're not going to leave me hanging, are you? I knew I should have said no. I knew it wasn't smart. But I stayed. We sat on the couch, sipping wine, talking like old friends. The conversation drifted from the usual small talk into more personal territory. About her divorce. About how lonely the house felt with Cam gone so often. It's strange, she said, swirling her wine. You get used to being needed. And then one day, you're not. There was a sadness in her voice that hit me harder than it should have. And when she smiled at me, soft, sad, and grateful, it felt like a door cracked open between us, just enough to make me curious about what was on the other side. I don't know who moved first. 1 second, we were sitting there, and the next, we were kissing. It wasn't planned. It wasn't even deliberate. It just happened. Her lips were warm and soft. And for a moment, the world outside of that room ceased to exist. I knew I should stop. Knew this was a disaster waiting to happen. But the way her hands slid into my hair, the way her body leaned into mine, it was like gravity. We ended up in her bedroom. Every logical thought vanished the second the door shut behind us. It was fast, reckless, and over far too soon. When it was done, we lay there in the quiet, both of us catching our breath. This is a bad idea, I whispered, even though I already knew it was too late. Yeah, she murmured, but she didn't move away. Neither of us said it out loud, but we knew this wouldn't be the last time. And it wasn't. Over the next few weeks, we kept finding excuses to see each other. A drink here, a visit there, always under the guise of something innocent. even though we both knew exactly what we were doing. Every time I told myself it was the last. Every time I came back. And then one night, everything unraveled. Kim wasn't supposed to come home until the weekend, but he showed up a day early, catching us off guard. We were sitting too close on the couch when he walked in, her hand on my knee, my arm draped lazily behind her. The second he saw us, his face twisted with confusion, then anger, then something worse, betrayal. "You gotta be fucking kidding me," he whispered, his voice low and dangerous. "Cam," I started, but he cut me off with a shove that sent me stumbling back into the coffee table. "How long?" he demanded, his fists clenched. "How long has this been going on?" I couldn't lie. "A few weeks," I admitted, shame burning in my throat. The look on his face was worse than any punch could have been. "You were supposed to be my friend," he said, his voice cracking. "How could you do this? With her?" There was nothing I could say to make it right. Nothing that would undo what we'd done. Cam stared at both of us, his hands shaking with fury. "Get out," he growled. "Cam, please. Get the fuck out." I left without another word, the weight of my betrayal pressing down on me with every step. Vanessa tried to reach out afterward, but I ignored her. Whatever thrill we'd shared wasn't worth the wreckage it left behind. "Come?" He blocked me on everything, phone, social media, the works. I tried to apologize, but he never responded. And honestly, I don't blame him. It's been years now, and I still replay that moment in my head. The second I could have walked away but didn't. The second I let something that should have been off limits ruin everything. Some mistakes you move on from. Others stay with you, branded into your memory like scars you can't ever escape. And this one will haunt me forever. We swore it wouldn't happen. I remember saying those exact words. "This will never happen to us." And she agreed, nodding like we had control over things like that. That was how it was with Liv. Everything felt possible, even the impossible things. We were best friends for 6 years, long enough to know each other's quirks and flaws, long enough to know exactly how to make the other laugh, and definitely long enough to know better than to cross that line. And yet somehow, it still happened. It started on a cold night in December. She'd just broken things off with some guy she'd been dating for a few months, the kind of relationship that was doomed from the start but still left her feeling raw. She showed up at my apartment unannounced, with a bottle of whiskey in one hand and her jacket half off her shoulder. "Please tell me you're not busy," she said, her breath visible in the cold air. I wasn't busy. I never was when it came to her. We sat on the floor of my living room, the whiskey between us, talking until the clock on the wall stopped meaning anything. She told me all the things she'd never said out loud, about how tired she was of dating, of hoping people would be something they never were. I listened like I always did. At some point, she leaned into me, her head resting on my shoulder. It was something she'd done 100 times before, but this time it felt different. Or maybe I just let it feel different. "I'm tired," she whispered, and I wasn't sure if she meant from the night, from the breakup, or from life in general. Without thinking, I pressed a kiss to the top of her head, something I'd never done before. She looked up, and in that moment, the space between us vanished. I knew I should stop. I knew this was the part where I was supposed to pull back, make a joke, push things back into the friend zone where they belonged. But I didn't. Instead, I kissed her. It was slow at first, like we were both testing the waters, making sure this was real. But then, just like that, it wasn't slow anymore. It was years of built-up tension, years of quiet moments we'd ignored, all pouring out at once. And before I knew it, we were in my bed, tangled up in each other, and everything else fell away. Afterward, we lay there in the dark, her head on my chest, her hand tracing absent patterns on my skin. I could feel her heartbeat, steady and real. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like the world had finally clicked into place. "This doesn't change us, right?" she whispered into the dark. I should have told her the truth, that it already had, that I didn't know how to go back to being just her friend. But instead, I kissed her forehead and said, "Right, nothing's changed." But everything had. For the next few weeks, we pretended we were still the same. We hung out, texted, laughed, just like we always had. But the nights we spent together in bed, wrapped up in each other, made it harder to keep pretending. Harder to ignore the way my heart twisted every time she left in the morning, like I was watching something slip away and couldn't stop it. The thing is, I didn't just want her in the quiet moments between midnight and morning. I wanted all of her. Her messy mornings, her sarcasm, her rants about bad TV shows. I wanted everything. But Liv wasn't built for that kind of permanence. She lived in moments, in fragments. And I was foolish enough to believe I could make her stay. It all came crashing down one night, as these things always do. We were lying in bed, her hair spread out across my pillow, and the words I'd been holding back finally broke free. "I love you," I whispered. She went still beside me, completely still, and in that silence, I felt everything between us crack. "Don't," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please don't say that." "Why not?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. She sat up, pulling the blanket around her like it was armor. "Because I can't give you that." And just like that, the truth hung heavy between us. I was asking her for something she didn't have to give. "I thought this was enough," she said quietly, her voice filled with regret. "I thought we could just have this." I nodded, even though my chest felt like it was caving in. "Yeah, me too." She stayed the night, but it wasn't the same. And in the morning, when she kissed me goodbye, I knew it would be the last time. We tried to keep things going after that, tried to slip back into the friendship that had once felt so easy. But the cracks were too deep, and every laugh, every conversation, was a reminder of what we'd lost. Slowly, painfully, we drifted apart, not with a fight, but with silence. The kind of silence that stretches out between two people who used to mean everything to each other. It's been months now, and I still think about her. Every time I hear a song she loved, every time I pass the coffee shop where we used to sit for hours, every time the night feels a little too quiet. I wonder if she ever thinks about me, if she misses what we had, even just a little. People say that sleeping with your best friend is either the best thing you'll ever do or the worst mistake you'll ever make. For me, it was both. For a little while, I had her. I had everything I'd ever wanted. And then, just like that, it was gone. Would I do it all over again? Honestly, I don't know. Part of me wishes I'd never kissed her, that we'd stayed on the safe side of the line where things made sense. But another part of me knows I wouldn't change a thing, because some people come into your life to teach you something about yourself. And even though it hurts, God, does it hurt, I'm still grateful. Because for a little while she was mine. And even if I never have that again, at least I know what it feels like to love someone that much. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. Or maybe it isn't. But either way, it's all I have. A few months after everything, I thought I was finally past it, beyond the pain, the doubts, and the anger. But the funny thing about healing is it doesn't move in a straight line. One moment, you feel like you've conquered it all, and the next, a random smell or song pulls you right back to square one. For me, it was a voicemail. I was standing in my kitchen, sautéing onions, when my phone buzzed. I didn't think much of it at first. Just another notification. Probably a spam call or a delivery update. But when I saw his name flash on the screen, my stomach flipped. I hadn't blocked him. I figured I was too mature for that. And honestly, part of me wanted him to see how good I was doing without him. The voicemail was short. His voice, strained and quiet, said, "I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I need to tell you something. Please just listen." Then it clicked off. I stood there for a long moment, holding my phone like it was something dangerous, deciding whether to delete it or give in to the curiosity clawing at the back of my mind. Against every shred of logic I possessed, I hit play again. He told me that he was sorry, not just for the cheating, but for the lies, the manipulation, for dragging me through hell. He said he wasn't reaching out to get back together, and he wasn't trying to mess with my life. He just needed to confess something he couldn't carry anymore. She had cheated on him too. I swear, I nearly dropped the phone. I sat down at the kitchen table, heart racing as his words sank in. He sounded broken, like a man who had been gutted from the inside out. And for a split second, just one, I felt sorry for him. Then it passed, and a bitter laugh escaped my lips before I could stop it. Of course she had cheated. Of course. There's some kind of poetic justice in that, isn't there? The cheater getting cheated on, the karma loop closing. But instead of satisfaction, all I felt was exhaustion. Because suddenly, it was clear to me, Some people just move through life like wrecking balls, smashing everything in their path and wondering why they're left standing in the rubble. He ended the message by saying he hoped I'd find someone who deserved me, someone who wouldn't make the same mistakes he did. And you know what? For the first time, I didn't need his words. I didn't need his closure, his guilt, or his apology to feel okay. That was his burden to carry, not mine. I deleted the voicemail and went back to cooking my onions. Life carried on, as it tends to do. I didn't talk about the voicemail with anyone, not even my closest friends. It didn't seem worth mentioning. But something shifted in me after that night. Like a door I'd been holding open finally clicked shut. Not with a slam, not with anger, just a quiet final closing. And then, one afternoon, out of nowhere, I met someone. It wasn't a grand, cinematic moment. No violins, no sparks flying. Just me, trying to parallel park like an idiot, and him, tapping on my window with a grin, offering to guide me into the spot. His name was Ryan. He wasn't flashy or dramatic, and thank God for that. He was kind in a way that felt effortless, like he didn't even realize how rare that was. Our first date was simple. A walk through the park with Milo in tow, followed by coffee at a little place that smelled like cinnamon and fresh bread. There were no grand confessions, no intense chemistry that burned too hot too soon. Just easy conversation and the kind of laughter that sneaks up on you and lingers long after the moment ends. And slowly, without even realizing it, I started to feel safe again. Not just with Ryan, but with myself. The walls I'd built so carefully began to come down, brick by brick, until I could breathe again without fear of the floor collapsing beneath me. One night, as we sat on my couch, watching some awful movie just for the fun of mocking it, he leaned over and kissed me. It wasn't perfect. He missed a little, and we both laughed against each other's lips, but it was real. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't dared to believe before. Love isn't supposed to feel like a battle. It's not about winning or losing, about proving your worth or holding on for dear life. It's supposed to feel like home. Ryan never made me guess where I stood with him. There were no mind games, no mixed signals, no hidden agendas. And maybe that's why I felt so different, so new. Because after years of walking on eggshells, being with someone who just showed up felt like magic. A few months in, he told me something that stuck with me. We were sitting on the porch, sharing a bottle of wine, when he said, "You know, love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone who's just as messed up as you are, and deciding they're worth the effort." And damn if that didn't hit me right in the heart. I don't know what the future holds for us. Maybe we'll last forever. Maybe we won't. But for the first time, I'm okay with not knowing. Because the lesson I've learned, the hardest and most beautiful lesson, is that I'm enough no matter what. Whether I'm with someone or on my own, I am whole. I am enough. And that's the thing about heartbreak. It doesn't destroy you. It cracks you open. And if you're lucky, you'll find something beautiful growing in the spaces where the pieces used to. The first time I tried to flirt at a laundromat, I accidentally hijacked someone else's laundry. Not on purpose, obviously, but tell that to the angry man in the corner who thought I was stealing his socks. It was a Thursday night, and I was down to my last clean pair of underwear, which meant it was officially laundry day. I figured the laundromat would be empty. Who does laundry on a Thursday night? Turns out, lots of people do, including her. She was sitting on top of one of the machines, flipping through a book, her earbuds tucked in, but not fully on, like she was waiting for someone to say hello. She wore an oversized hoodie and ripped jeans, and her sneakers dangled off the edge of the machine. She looked effortlessly cool. The kind of cool you only see in music videos or people who somehow manage to style their hair without it frizzing out of control. Naturally, my brain went into panic mode. Talk to her, it whispered. This is your chance. Cute girl. Low-stakes environment. Nothing can go wrong. Yeah, famous last words. I loaded my clothes into the washer, trying to look casual. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw her glance my way and smile. A small, curious smile, like maybe she wouldn't mind if I said something. So, with all the courage I could muster, I walked over. "Hey," I said, giving what I hoped was a friendly grin. "Do you come here often?" She blinked, and for a second, I wanted to meld into the floor. "Do you come here often?" At a laundromat? Who even says that? But to my relief, She didn't laugh or roll her eyes. "Only when I run out of socks," she said, holding up a lone one from her basket. "It's, kind of a crisis situation." I laughed, relaxing a little. "Same here," I said. "I'm down to my last pair. They're not my finest." She grinned, setting her book down. "Laundry roulette. It's a dangerous game." I was starting to think this might actually go well. She was funny, easy to talk to, and I hadn't said anything too embarrassing yet. So, naturally, the universe decided it was time to spice things up. As we talked, I glanced at the machine where I'd just thrown my clothes. The thing was buzzing away, water sloshing around behind the glass. And that's when I noticed something odd. There was a very bright, very floral patterned dress spinning inside the washer. I stared at it, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. I hadn't put a dress in there, unless my sweatpants had developed a secret life I didn't know about. And then it hit me. I had loaded my clothes into the wrong machine. "Oh no," I muttered under my breath. The girl, who was still watching me with an amused smile, raised an eyebrow. "What's wrong?" I said, my voice trailing off in disbelief. "I think I accidentally hijacked someone's laundry." She leaned over to look inside the washer, and when she saw the floral dress, she burst out laughing. "Oh my God, that's not yours, is it?" "Nope," I said, running a hand through my hair. "Not even close." Before I could figure out what to do, a middle-aged man wearing a World's Okayest Dad t-shirt stomped over to us, glaring at the machine like it had personally insulted him. "Hey," he barked. "Is that my stuff?" I froze. Maybe?" The man stared at me like I'd just confessed to a major felony. "What do you mean, maybe?" "Well, technically," I stammered, feeling my face turn red. "I might have accidentally put my clothes in with yours." The girl was laughing so hard she had to cover her mouth, which didn't help the situation. Meanwhile, the dad looked like he was about to call the police. "You mixed our laundry?" he said, aghast. "Who does that?" I thought it was an empty machine," I said desperately. "It was an honest mistake." The girl was now wiping tears from her eyes, trying to catch her breath. "This is incredible," she whispered. "Best thing I've seen all week." "Glad I could entertain," I muttered, knowing there was no way to salvage this. To my surprise, the dad finally sighed and waved a hand in defeat. "Whatever," he grumbled. "Just don't ruin my wife's dress, okay?" I nodded, relieved. "Promise. Your dress is safe with me." He shot me one last withering look before stalking off to the other side of the laundromat, leaving me standing there with the girl, both of us still trying not to burst into uncontrollable laughter. "That was amazing," she said, shaking her head. "You really committed to that disaster." "Yeah," I muttered, rubbing the back of my neck. "I have a gift." For a moment, we just stood there, grinning at each other. And then, before I could lose my nerve, I said, "So, if you ever want to see more of my laundry-related talents, maybe we could grab coffee sometime?" She tilted her head, clearly amused. "Coffee, huh? Is that code for please help me separate my colors from my whites?" "Absolutely," I said, grinning. "I could really use some guidance." She laughed again, pulling out her phone. "All right, disaster boy. Give me your number, and I'll let you know if I'm free." I stared at her in disbelief. "Wait, seriously?" "Yeah," she said with a playful smile. "Anyone who can survive that level of awkward deserves at least one coffee." I handed her my phone, trying not to look too excited. As she typed in her number, I couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, this was the weirdest, luckiest laundromat trip of my life. When she handed my phone back, she gave me a wink. "Good luck with the dress," she said, grabbing her basket. "And maybe stick to your own machine next time." I watched her leave, a goofy grin plastered on my face. And as I stood there, still holding the phone with her number on the screen, I thought, yeah, totally worth it, even if I had to wash a floral dress to make it happen. This happened just a few weeks ago, and I still haven't been able to shake it. I live alone in a small apartment, nothing fancy. Just me, a cat named Milo, and enough space to not feel cramped. The place is old, but I never minded. I actually kind of like the quirks, the creaky floorboards, the pipes that groan whenever I turn on the shower. It made the place feel lived in. But about a month ago, weird things started happening. Small at first. I'd leave a light on in the kitchen, only to find it turned off when I came back. I thought maybe I'd forgotten turning it off myself. A door I'd left open would be shut. Milo would hiss at corners of the room for no reason, his back arching like there was something there that I couldn't see. It was annoying, but I figured it was just my mind playing tricks on me. You tell yourself it's nothing, because what else could it be? Then one night, I woke up around 3 a.m. with the strangest feeling that I wasn't alone. You know that sensation when someone's standing over you, watching? It was like that, so heavy it made the air feel thick in my throat. I sat up in bed, heart pounding, and looked around the room. Nothing. The apartment was silent, except for Milo curled up at the foot of the bed, his eyes wide open, staring into the darkness. I told myself I was just being paranoid. I've been stressed from work, maybe watched one too many horror movies. I lay back down, try to close my eyes, and that's when I heard it. A soft, deliberate click, the unmistakable sound of the bathroom door shutting. My heart nearly stopped. I hadn't left the bathroom door open. I always closed it before bed. I lay there, frozen, every instinct telling me not to move. The apartment was small enough that I could hear everything, and I knew that something had just moved inside my home. I sat up slowly, trying not to make any noise. The bathroom door was only a few feet from my bed, just past the hallway. The door itself was now shut, but I could see the faint outline of light from the night light I kept plugged into the wall inside the bathroom. And then I saw it. The doorknob, it turned. Not a full turn, just a soft jiggle like someone was testing it. I felt my blood run cold. Milo hissed from the bed, his fur standing on end, and bolted off, hiding under the couch. I wanted to run too. I wanted to throw myself out of the nearest window and never come back. But instead, I just sat there paralyzed, staring at that doorknob. It jiggled again. Then slowly the door opened. It swung outward with an eerie slowness, as if whoever, or whatever, was inside wasn't in any kind of hurry. The nightlight inside cast long, distorted shadows along the hallway, and I stared into the open bathroom, holding my breath. There was nothing there. The bathroom was empty, just the sink, the shower, and the nightlight casting a dim, orange glow. But the door hadn't opened on its own. It couldn't have. And that's when I noticed the shower curtain. It had been pulled closed. I never left the shower curtain closed. Ever. I felt my pulse hammering in my ears, my mouth dry. I knew that something was standing behind that curtain. I could feel it. The air was so cold it hurt to breathe, and the silence was unbearable. I wanted to leave. I wanted to grab Milo and run out of that apartment, never looking back. But some awful, morbid part of me needed to see. I needed to know what was behind that curtain. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept by my bed, heart pounding so loud it felt like it might burst. I inched forward one step at a time until I was standing right in front of the shower. I reached out, hand trembling, and grabbed the edge of the curtain. I yanked it open. Nothing. Just an empty tub. I let out a shaky breath, laughing nervously, feeling like an idiot. You're just losing it, I told myself. Stress, bad sleep, it's all in your head. I left the bathroom, shutting the door behind me, and crawled back into bed. Milo eventually came out from under the couch and curled up next to me, but I couldn't sleep. I kept listening for sounds, for the click of another door, for something, but the apartment stayed quiet the rest of the night. I thought that was the end of it. I tried to convince myself that I'd imagined the whole thing. Until the next morning, when I woke up, the bathroom door was open again, and the shower curtain was closed. I moved out 2 days later. Didn't even finish the lease. Left most of my stuff behind, packed what I could, and never looked back. But sometimes, late at night, in my new place, I still feel it. That heavy, suffocating presence, like someone standing just out of sight, waiting. And every now and then, I wake up to find a door open that I know I closed, or a curtain drawn that I always leave open. And each time, I hear the faintest sound, barely more than a whisper, coming from just beyond the door. Let me in. You know what needs to be banned, like, immediately? Bathroom hand dryers. Yeah, I said it. Those loud, germ-blasting machines that pretend to dry your hands but really just send bacteria flying at 90 miles per hour across the entire bathroom. Have you ever actually walked out of a restroom with your hands fully dry after using one of those things? No. Instead, you're left rubbing your damp palms on your jeans like some kind of barbarian because those stupid dryers decided to quit after 10 seconds. And God forbid you try to restart them. Now you look like a mime doing battle with an invisible air cannon. The worst offenders are those fancy Dyson ones. They make this whoosh sound like they're about to propel you into another dimension, but all they do is shoot wet air straight up your sleeves. Congratulations, you've washed your hands just to spend the rest of the day feeling like you've plunged your arms into a bucket of cold noodles. Meanwhile, there's a perfectly good paper towel dispenser right there. Empty, of course, because someone decided that being eco-friendly means making us all miserable. You know what's not eco-friendly, though? Office printers. Why do we still have printers in the year 2024? This is the most chaotic piece of technology humanity has ever invented. It's like they designed them specifically to cause suffering. The moment you need to print something important, some deadline-critical document, the printer will decide it's out of toner or jammed or just done with life. Oh, you need 12 pages printed? I'll give you the first 11 and smear the last one with an unholy black streak. Good luck explaining that to your boss. Here's the thing. Printers should only be used in museums now, as relics of a darker time. No one even knows how to fix them. IT professionals? Useless. They just stare at it, clicking random buttons, muttering, "Have you tried turning it off and on again?" Yes, Brad. I've restarted it. I've also performed a seance, lit a candle, and offered up my firstborn, and the thing still won't print. Let's just admit printers have no place in a civilized society and ban them outright. And while we're purging useless technology, let's talk about those smart refrigerators. Who asked for these? Do I really need an appliance that tells me when I'm out of milk? No, thank you, I already have anxiety for that. The other day, I was at a friend's house, and she proudly showed off her smart fridge. "Look," she said, tapping the touch screen like she was launching a space mission. "It sends me notifications if I leave the door open." Cool. Now you've got a refrigerator that nags you like an overbearing roommate. And just wait until it's connected to your Wi-Fi and starts glitching. Nothing says modern technology like getting locked out of your own groceries because your fridge decided it needed a software update. The only thing worse than smart appliances? Subscriptions for everything. We've reached a point where companies won't sell you a product anymore. They sell you a service. Razor blades? Subscription. Coffee pods? Subscription. I'm honestly waiting for someone to offer a subscription plan for oxygen. It'll come with different tiers too. For just $9.99 a month, you'll get access to our basic air package. Upgrade to premium for double the lung capacity. It's gotten so bad that I can't even buy a piece of software without feeling like I just signed a mortgage. Every time I need to edit a PDF or run antivirus software, I get hit with, "Start your free trial today." No, I don't want a free trial. I want to pay for this thing once, use it forever, and forget about it like a normal human being. But nope. Everything has to come with a recurring fee. At this rate, I half expect my toaster to start charging me $4.99 a month just to make toast. And don't even get me started on automated customer service. Gone are the days when you could call a company and talk to an actual person. Now, you're greeted by some chipper AI that pretends it understands your problem. "I see you're having an issue with your bill. Is that correct?" "No, it's not, Hal. I'm trying to report fraud because someone in Nebraska bought 14 washing machines using my credit card, and I live 3,000 miles away. But sure, let's pretend you know what you're doing." And the worst part? These systems trap you in an endless loop of options. Press 1 for billing, 2 for technical support, or 3 if you'd like to throw your phone into a lake. After 30 minutes of screaming, "Representative, representative," into the void, you finally get connected to someone. And that's when you hear, "Hi, this is Kyle. How can I help you today?" Except Kyle is clearly not in the mood to help. Kyle's soul left his body somewhere between his first coffee break and your call, and now you're just two miserable humans trapped in a conversation neither of you wants to be part of. Honestly, it's wild how everything these days feels like an elaborate prank. Want to enjoy a concert? Get ready to sell your soul for tickets because bots bought out the first batch in 2 seconds. Want to rent an apartment? Better have 3 months rent up front, a credit score higher than the national debt, and a letter of recommendation from the Pope. And if you think ordering food delivery will be any easier, think again. Last week, I ordered a burger and fries. The delivery app charged me $6 for delivery, $3 for service fees, $2 for small order fees, and a $1.50 tip. By the time it arrived, I had paid more in fees than I did for the actual food. And don't even get me started on shrinkflation in restaurants. I unwrapped that burger, and it looked like it belonged on the kids' menu. I paid $15 for a slider and 6 fries. 6? Who do they think they are, serving fries like precious gems? I half expected the waiter to present them on a velvet pillow with a little pair of tongs. If we're paying more for less food, the least they can do is serve it with some dignity. Look, I get it. Life is complicated, but it doesn't have to be this ridiculous. We're drowning in subscriptions, hand dryers, and scammy delivery fees, while printers and automated phone systems slowly break our spirits. Honestly, all I want is to live in a world where things make sense, where burgers are big, printers work, and you don't need a tech degree just to open your refrigerator. Until then, I'll be here, shaking my wet hands in frustration, stuck in the endless loop of modern life.